Good morning. Welcome to day 2 of CyberTalks presented by CyberScoop. I'm Goldie Kamali, your host and CEO of Scoop News Group, and I'm thrilled you could join us today. On day 2 of CyberTalks, we'll be discussing the new FBI cyber strategy, local cyber threat intelligence sharing, how social media disinformation threatens democracy, threat management in an uncertain world, election security, and the future of encryption. The goal for today is that you learn something new and leave inspired to do something big. Please use the hashtag CyberTalks to participate in the discussion. I'd like to take a moment to thank our diamond sponsors, Accenture, AWS, Cisco, Dell Technologies, Fortinet, Google Cloud, IBM, Intel, Leidos, Lumen Technologies, McAfee, Carahsoft, Microsoft, Okta, Raytheon Intelligence and Space, Veritas, VMware, and Carbon Black, and Yubico. With that, let's kick off our program. I am thrilled to introduce our first speaker. She'll be outlining the new FBI cyber strategy. She's the Deputy Assistant Director of the Cyber Division at FBI. Welcome, Tanya Bugoritz.
Last year at CyberTalks, I spoke about how cybercriminals with different skill sets join forces in global cybercriminal enterprises that no single government agency or single government can effectively fight alone. To explain how we can most effectively combat these enterprises, I pitched a bad movie plot comparing different government agencies, private industry, and foreign partners to the Avengers, and I talked about how we're stronger when we unite to bring our authorities, information, and capabilities together. So it's 1 year later, and I'm sorry to say no one from Hollywood is called to option my screenplay. But that doesn't mean nothing's happened. In fact, the FBI in the past year has acted to turn that vision of partnership into a strategy, our plan of action for impacting not only cyber criminals, but also foreign government-affiliated cyber actors who for too long have thought they could exploit the gaps between us with impunity. What do I mean by gaps? The cyber threats we're most concerned about involve foreign actors using global infrastructure to compromise U.S. networks. It's not the type of threat activity that any single U.S. agency or private entity is able to anticipate, detect, and respond to completely on our own, no matter how we organize and reorganize government. Our adversaries know this. They seek to exploit the gaps in our system between foreign and domestic authorities, national security and criminal threats, and government and private sector responsibility for defending critical networks. That's what our strategy aims to change. Our strategy is built on the understanding that the FBI is uniquely placed to bridge these gaps. Our strategy is to impose risk and consequences on our cyber adversaries, those who for too long have believed they can compromise U.S. networks, steal U.S. financial and intellectual property, and hold our critical infrastructure at risk, all without incurring any risk themselves. And the best way we have identified to do that is to use our unique authorities, our world-class capabilities, and our enduring partnerships, not just for the FBI, but in service to the larger cyber community. The most important aspect of our strategy is the role the FBI plays as an indispensable partner. We have a unique role as the lead domestic federal agency with law enforcement and counterintelligence authorities, which means that as an intelligence agency, we can see adversary intentions and threats. As a domestic agency, with a broad national presence, we can engage with you on what we see. And as an operational agency, we can act. We can use our information and our presence and our partnerships not only to pursue our own actions, but to enable our many partners to do what you need to do, whether that's to defend your networks, attribute malicious activity, sanction bad behavior, or for some of our DoD and IC partners to take the fight to our adversaries overseas. We want to create opportunities for our partners in our common fight because we recognize that we can have a much broader impact by working together. That means sometimes we might delay or forego a law enforcement action, such as an arrest or an indictment or an infrastructure takedown, when that's not the best way to have an impact on an adversary. But more often, it means we will put our plans on the table, ask our partners to do the same, and determine together how we will execute joint, enabled, and sequenced operations for maximum impact. To enable this team approach, we've created unique hubs with members of the cyber community where we can work alongside each other and build long-term relationships. We're working on building an atmosphere of trust and collaboration, the kind that can only come from sitting across the table from someone you know and really hashing things out. Within the government space, that hub is the National Cyber Investigative Joint Task Force, the NCI-JTF, our main mechanism to collaborate on counter-cyber campaigns within the government. Led by the FBI, the NCI-JTF includes more than 30 co-located agencies from the intelligence community as well as law enforcement. The FBI has pushed a significant amount of our own operational and analytical capabilities into the NCI-JTF to strengthen its role as a core element of this nation's cyber strategy. And this year, we invited senior executives from other agencies to lead new threat-focused mission centers there. But the government alone can't achieve the impact we need. The fight requires a whole-of-society approach, with both the government and private sector working together against these threats. That's why we've also created public-private hubs, such as the National Defense Cyber Alliance, the NDCA, where experts from the FBI and cleared defense contractors sit together and share and act on intelligence in real time. We're also co-located with partners at the National Cyber Forensics and Training Alliance, the NCFTA, in Pittsburgh and New York City, which includes other law enforcement, academia, and private industry, especially from the financial sector. The information we share with each other at these hubs, day in and day out, is what creates the long-term, trusted relationships we need to work together on joint disruptions. In addition to these hubs, agents in every FBI field office work to establish relationships in their communities on all manner of criminal, foreign intelligence, cyber, and terrorism threats before there's a problem. With 56 field offices and hundreds of resident agencies across the country, knowing your points of contact in an FBI office before an incident is critical to ensuring open lines of communication. We're also making the most of our strong presence overseas. We have dedicated cyber assistant legal attachés around the globe to exchange information with our foreign partners, helping the FBI and our partners understand the global nature of the threat. So when we talk about this strategy, what's changed and what does this look like in real life? For those of you who've been in this business for a while, you know that information sharing is not one size fits all. More often, it's a multi-layered approach. We've heard the private sector's concerns about receiving alerts and notifications from different federal agencies that appear uncoordinated. We took steps this year to change that. We've worked closely with our counterparts in NSA's Cybersecurity Directorate and in CISA to create mechanisms to coordinate. From here on out, you can be assured that if you see something from one of us, all of us have reviewed it, coordinated on it, and made a decision about which of us, individually or together, is best to deliver that message to the intended audience. We're sharing indicators of compromise and tactics used by cyber actors, as well as strategic threat information directly with those who need to receive it through our notifications from active investigations. The timeliness in release of the notifications has improved greatly. We understand that we need tailored approaches to each situation that bring together the right people, tools, and authorities at the right time, and we can't do that without trust, relationships, and people. We can't be effective without the partnerships and the information we receive from all of you. Let me explain this better through the example of cyber threats to COVID-19 research. Earlier this year, we saw several of the People's Republic of China's most effective and prolific cyber actors focus their efforts to target many of the companies, universities, and laboratories identified in the news as working on COVID vaccines and treatments. We engaged in three main ways. First, through victim engagement. As we identified known or potential victims of Chinese-sponsored hacking, we deployed FBI field office and headquarters personnel to work with the victims. We did that first to ensure they were aware of the attempted or real intrusion, but then, with their consent and our authorities, to collect evidence and intelligence from their networks. This evidence and information helped our efforts to identify others who had already been victimized, and also to identify those who had not yet suffered an intrusion but might be facing a similar threat. That evidence is also valuable for any needed future legal actions, and the intelligence is shared with our IC partners to inform them how foreign threats are actually manifesting on U.S. victim networks. Second, we use the information we learned from engaging with victims to broaden our outreach to others at risk. We married up the intelligence we saw on China's activity with the information we gleaned from first working with the victim entities to better understand how the intrusions took place. With this knowledge, we immediately prepared a public industry notification, what we refer to as a PIN, to be delivered to universities, labs, and research institutions by FBI agents from our 56 field offices. The first PIN was tailored and specific to these companies that we already knew were being targeted, and the information provided was not meant for wide public distribution. But we also understood that there were many other companies involved in research that were either soon to be targeted or might already be targeted. Working with our U.S. government partners, we built out a larger group of entities that were involved in any aspect of COVID research, treatment, or remediation. At that point, we prepared another PIN that, while slightly less specific, laid out the threat these companies were facing. We also prepared another product, what we refer to as a flash, that provided these companies' cybersecurity personnel with indicators of compromise known to be associated with these attacks from PRC actors. Our third effort was the collaboration with our IC, U.S. government, and international partners. Often, the information we may collect through our investigations can be corroborated and contextualized through the use of information from our fellow intelligence agencies. Reciprocally, we at the FBI are able to increase their collection and understanding of the threat actors by providing information collected from victim networks or through legal process employed in our investigation of intrusions against entities doing COVID research. One point I would also like to highlight is our joint public service announcement that we released in early May. As you may know, the FBI rarely makes statements such as these regarding other nation-state activities, but after much discussion within the FBI and with our partners, we felt it was necessary. Our purpose for this public service announcement was twofold. First, to alert the American public to the threat we continue to face from hackers controlled by the People's Republic of China intelligence services, and also raise awareness for other companies or researchers that may not have seen themselves as likely targets. Second, to clearly state to China that we're aware of their actions and that there will be risk and consequences for their malicious cyber activity during this exceptionally challenging time, not only in the United States, but around the world. In this example, you can see that the key to success is not just what the FBI can do, but also the role victims play in helping the government learn about adversary activity so we can respond most effectively. I can't overestimate how important this cooperation and insight is. That's why our strategy includes a pledge to victims that, In pursuing our mission, we recognize that we will encounter unique and novel issues related to privacy and handling of sensitive data. We will always treat victims with dignity and respect, protecting their privacy and data, and rigorously adhering to the U.S. Constitution, applicable laws, regulations, and policies, and the FBI's core values. Another recent example of our strategy in practice included a series of sequenced, coordinated actions against the Iranian cyber threat that included, over the course of 1 week, numerous law enforcement actions, indicator releases, and U.S. Treasury sanctions in order to impose risk and consequence against the full spectrum of Iran's cyber threat activity, from Iran-based hackers to individuals inspired by the Iranian regime, to contract cyber actors, to Iranian government organizations themselves. And we're working closely with other government agencies and with industry to combat the ransomware threat. Recently, we joined with the NCFTA in hosting our second annual Ransomware Summit. This event brought together members of the intelligence community and federal law enforcement agencies, along with private sector and academic partners with expertise in ransomware, cybersecurity, cyber insurance, and cyber incident response to share the latest developments in ransomware and work on possible solutions. The summit also provided a variety of perspectives on the ransomware threat, with a series of panel discussions with industry experts. This year's discussions included insight on ransomware's impact on the insurance industry, incident handling, and working with victims from a cybersecurity and privacy-focused law perspective, adversary methodologies, the rise of data breaches from ransomware attacks, and case studies from 2 industry-leading cryptocurrency analysis companies. This event is just one example of how we are working to break down walls and work together on the most pressing cyber threats. We know that private industry and the public want the elements of government to work together. We know our outreach to you sometimes has looked ad hoc or uncoordinated. We know the actions of government can be opaque. But here's what you should know. None of us is acting in isolation. When you see an action by one agency, there's likely more from others you haven't seen or that you don't realize are connected. When you receive an advisory from one of us, it represents coordination by all of us. And when you receive that phone call or visit from the FBI that you are threatened by or have suffered a cyber intrusion, your response can not only protect your own network, but can also directly strengthen our ability to protect others and to impose risk and consequences on our adversaries together. Thank you.
Coming up next.
Thank you very much for everything that you do to keep us safe, healthy, productive, and proud to be American citizens. And thank you for the time today to allow me to share with you my insights on cloud security. So today I'll talk about why cloud in the public sector, why we talk of acceleration. I'll give you more detail on the zero trust framework that I think might be important for you to consider, the role of automation, and then some guidelines on where to start. So first of all, why in cloud in public sector? I think of this in 3 primary buckets: agility, operational effectiveness, and cost. On the agility side, you can experiment, you can get innovations at the tip of your finger, rather than waiting for the infrastructure deployed. In operational effectiveness, many reasons. One of them is in terms of the fact that you can spin things up and down using automation, but also that you get integrated management rather than swivel chair management of multiple environments. In the cloud, at least if you go with the appropriate platform, you get consistent controls, which is really important. And then cost. Clearly, you don't have to deploy infrastructure. You can start using it. You can scale up and down, and that becomes really important as well. Now, by the way, these are recommendations from a report from the Digital Transformation Authority of the Australian government. But I found that to be very useful because I think it applies everywhere. Now, what's interesting is I find these are the same drivers for cloud adoption in the private sector as in public sector as well. In the public sector, I believe there are a few additional drivers, because the scale that you need in some cases, millions of citizens or operatives in the field. The robustness and availability, right? The citizens are expecting these services to be on and such. It becomes really critical. Now, when you think of cloud adoption, we think of three primary sets of use cases. The first is where our employees, you yourselves, are using cloud services to make yourself more productive, right? You can be using consumer services that you like in your personal life. You want a similar set of use cases in your professional lives as well. But in some cases, those are untrusted, and they may not have this kind of security controls that an enterprise class grade service like a 365 or Salesforce ServiceNow, Workday, and others may have. Now, our employees may not know why they should not be using a particular service. They may not know it's not SOC 2 compliant, doesn't have FedRAMP certification. Maybe it's hosted in a country that you don't want them to use and such, right? So getting visibility and control of that becomes important. In terms of these approved services, recommended services, like as I mentioned, enterprise grade, even though the services are IT procured and IT vetted, I think it's important that the use of the service is appropriate, right? So if an employee inadvertently or otherwise shares confidential data with a competitor or someone they shouldn't, that's not the service provider's problem, that's our problem, right? So there's the whole shared responsibility model that needs to be met in the use of these services. And the last set of use cases has to what we call business transformation, where developers are writing code. That code more and more is running in a public cloud environment, AWS, Azure, GCP, and others. I need to make sure that the service is secure, but also the way that the service is using infrastructure is secure as well. So we don't have the open S3 bucket problem. So these are the three primary drivers that we see for cloud adoption. Now, why do I talk of acceleration? The reason is because just in the post-COVID world, just in a matter of a few months, the adoption of cloud has gone through the roof, right? So even in government, we see about 45% in a matter of a few months. And then the problem is where the cloud goes, where data goes, so does the attention of the adversaries, right? So here we see that the number of threats have gone up by more than 700% for government use of cloud, public sector use of cloud in a matter of a few months. Now let's double click a little bit into that. And as we dig in deeper, so this is the iconography that you think in terms of your cloud at the top, the use of the cloud from the traditional sort of campus environments. And then on the left-hand side, this is work from home, as we are doing today. So on average, as I said, the cloud use has gone by 50%. Again, it's a matter of a few months. You can imagine, it almost, in my mind, it's almost like strapping a jet engine behind a car that was already going very fast, right? So we see that sort of some of the issues there. We see that the use of cloud that's coming in from the traditional perimeter is reduced by 25% in a matter of a few months. I think actually it's since then we've seen the reduction decelerate. So that is the traffic going from our traditional kind of campus environments has gone down even further. This is interesting. So not only have we seen the use from employees working from home, but in many cases, the employees accessing public cloud, the cloud services that we've enabled for them from their home computers, from unmanaged devices, grew up by more than 100% in a matter of a few months. And of course, the bad guys, right? The 630% average increase in threats in a matter of a few months, right? So what we've seen is that our threat landscape has changed. The threat vectors have changed. The threat velocity has changed. So some of the environments has changed as well, like the unmanaged device control. So now, if you think of this as the perimeter going away, this deperimeterization was one of the reasons why the Jericho Forum in the early 2000s came up with the Zero Trust framework. And NIST has taken that and said, actually, in today's world, the perimeter has dissolved even faster. So that Zero Trust framework actually is highly relevant today, right? And they published this saying that our current methods, which are very perimeter, which are network-based controls, are sort of being outstripped by what's happening today. And they came up with this, they renewed the Zero Trust architecture. Trust nobody, or don't give anybody any implicit trust as well, right? So make sure that when a request comes in, that you check the validity of the user, of the application, the object that's making the request, and only give them the access for the period that's required. Don't give them more access than is appropriate. So also, since today we see accesses that are as many from user to user, cloud to cloud, object to object, perhaps even more so than person to cloud. So treat everything as a resource. Do not grant trust based on network location. Do not assume that if the person's coming from an enterprise network, which as we saw is going away, the perimeter is dissolving. Prior to the Jericho Forum, the assumption was if the person's coming from a trusted network, the access is trusted, untrusted network is untrusted. Well, that obviously has to be reviewed. Grant trust based on attribute, based on context, where the person's coming from, who the person is, what the behavior is, and so on and so forth. And then continuously monitor and don't give trust for longer periods than they need to make it adaptive. So what does that mean today for us? So what we see, this zero trust architecture, we need to have front door controls for the untrusted apps, right? So in the case of, when I say untrusted, it could be personal apps, so maybe a personal OneDrive, personal Dropbox. Make sure that you control the access to those apps, access to what data goes into it or maybe comes out, because in some cases what may be coming out could be malware. And then make sure you provide controls for your employees using some of these shadow apps, right? Again, because they may not understand risk, and you want to make sure that your confidential data isn't going to a risky app or malware isn't coming in. But even when you talk of trusted apps, right? So here you want to make sure, because of that more than 100% increase in access from home computer and personal devices, maybe you want to provide conditional access. Conditional access could say that if the person's coming from a device where I have my controls on the device, it's a corporate issued device, an organization issued device, maybe I allow the user to have more flexibility, right? Maybe you can download confidential data on the device. But if it's a home computer, maybe I don't want that confidential data to be downloaded on the home computer because I've effectively lost track of it. So I want conditional access on trusted apps. And in the case of custom apps, the same thing. I want the zero trust access controls on what I think of as the front door controls to my cloud environment. Now, unfortunately, most of the other zero trust initiatives stop at these front door controls. But what I submit to you is yes, we do need these front door controls, and every platform worth its salt will have those. You need to make sure that you also have controls on the side doors. So, I'm thinking the metaphor of a house with doors on the front and the side, and you'll see at the back as well. And it's important, it's imperative that we have these controls, these zero trust controls, not just on the front door, but the side and back door controls as well. So let me give you some examples of these side doors. So let's take in the SaaS world, if a collaboration app, maybe Microsoft Teams, you should be able to control who can participate in a Teams channel, right? What kind of guest users, what domain they come from, what kind of data can be shared in the channel, what kind of data can be introduced in the channel and such, right? Because that channel is enabling data flowing in and out into your organization. And any of those data flows are staying within Teams, are staying within the cloud, right? So none of your front door controls will be able to protect your data on these side door channels. Similarly, you may have a third-party application, maybe a helper application, connecting with your Teams or your Slack or your G Suite or your OneDrive or Exchange. And again, any of the data flowing into and out between that third-party application, that third-party cloud and your cloud is not even visible, leave alone protectable by your front door, right? So you need to make sure that you understand what's going on all of these side doors, get the visibility and get the controls on any data flowing in and out on the side doors as well as you do on the front doors. I hope that makes sense. So similarly, in the code that you develop is written, that's running in a public cloud or private cloud environment, you need to make sure that your instance, your application, your virtual machine, your container isn't talking to a third party that it shouldn't, right? So you need that control, if you will, that zero trust control within the cloud, within your public cloud environment, within your IaaS and PaaS environment, to make sure that you have complete visibility into those side doors as well. All right, so we discussed the front door and the side door, but then there are back doors too. So the back door, again, the analogy I'm using here is the back door is misconfigurations, right? So if I leave my S3 bucket open with confidential data in it and data leaks out, well, that's a problem, right? So, or there's a similar issue on the SaaS side as well. So for example, Microsoft 365 has more than 100 parameters that need to be configured. And misconfiguration on some of those can effectively be the equivalent of an open S3 bucket, right? So it's really, really important that we have our controls, our zero trust controls on the front door, on the side door, and on the back doors. And then there are use cases where data has to leave your cloud environment, right? Maybe that data needs to be shared with a partner. But then you need to make sure that you can enforce those controls on the data even as it moves away, right? And one way to do that is to wrap the data with an EDRM or Enterprise Digital Rights Management wrapper, such that the zero trust controls move with the data, right? So your partner can share it with somebody else, but when somebody else tries to open it and share it or print it or copy it, they have to come back and get permissions. So this brings together this comprehensive zero trust, right? So as I mentioned, let's make sure that, or I implore you to make sure that your platform that you use for cloud security does not just focus on the front doors, but also on the side doors and the back doors to give you comprehensive zero trust. Because if data leaks out or malware comes in, it doesn't matter which door it comes in from or leaks out from. You need to make sure you have these appropriate controls. And whatever platform you deploy, again, I implore you to make sure that it's a true platform. First of all, it's not just point products stitched together. That platform gives you this constant data protection, threat prevention, governance and compliance, this comprehensive zero trust controls. Doesn't matter where data goes, whether it's on the device, from your side on the device, or whether it's going to these sort of personal untrusted SaaS services, the approved SaaS services, whether they are the enterprise-wide or department-wide, or even your private environments, right? Now, at the bottom, what you see is these are categories that the analysts are given, but those are interesting, but no one buys a category, right? You want to make sure you address your need, and I implore you to have a platform that gives you comprehensive zero trust, but also allows that one DLP policy to be specified and posted everywhere, telemetry from all these places so you can look for anomalous behaviors and so on and so forth. The last piece I want to spend some time on is automation. There are many elements of automation, like automation for developers, to shift left to give you DevSecOps, automation to bring your users into the loop, automation for your SOC, such that, for example, maybe you can leverage your MITRE framework that your SOC is used to, or even cloud native threats and incidents. But the one I'm going to focus the next few minutes on is automation for your cloud security journey. So one of the questions that we have that I get asked, my co-founders and I started Sky Networks in 2011. So we've been doing cloud security for a while. And then, and even now, the question we get asked all the time is, so where am I in my cloud maturity journey? What should I do next? What are the key performance indicators I should be looking at? How do I compare to my peers, and so on and so forth? And I think it's imperative that the cloud platform that you go with to address your cloud security needs helps you address these kinds of questions, right? So here's an example of a cloud security maturity advisor that depicts for you on a 2x2 matrix, control and visibility, where you are, the orange dot, versus your peers, right? So you may be doing well on visibility, but not so well on control. That it tells you what is, based on best practices, what you should be doing to improve your score on one of the other axes, right? So in this particular case, I want to improve my score on visibility. The platform tells me that you have all these SaaS services that are being used, but they're not being managed. So for example, on the right, you see, it says that I see data going to Box, but you don't have the visibility into what's going on to Box, right? And again, you want the platform not only to produce this for you as this insight, but also be actionable, so that you could, for example, click on that link and go into the platform, assuming you have the right role, of course, go into the platform and configure the policy and say, hey, my policy I'm applying to OneDrive and SharePoint, maybe what's going into a post on LinkedIn, maybe I'm controlling what's sitting in an S3 bucket. I want to make sure that that same control is now applied to Box as well. So the ability to leverage that policy, as I said, across the entire environment, untrusted apps, trusted apps, maybe even what's sitting inside your IaaS and PaaS environment, and your cloud security advisor should give you that visibility to what you should be doing next. It should give you sort of an understanding of what your cloud footprint is, right? How is it changing with time? How's the behavior? How has the product helped you? How has the platform helped you reduce your risk? How often has confidential documents been prevented from being shared? Malware from being introduced, and so on and so forth. This becomes really important for you to understand, to answer questions of where am I? How do I compare to my peers? How am I trending with time? What should I be doing next? And this is actually proof. And in fact, this is an example from a real customer who went from the bottom quadrant to the top quadrant in a matter of 3 months, simply by following the prescriptive best practices, right? No additional expense, no additional complexity, no additional sort of user input required. So to bring it all together, the takeaways for you are essentially look at a platform-based approach to your cloud security needs, a platform that gives you consistent data protection, threat prevention, governance and compliance across your entire environment. The example I mentioned earlier, say DLP policy, same DLP policy enforced on what goes into a LinkedIn post, maybe what goes into GitHub, OneDrive, or SharePoint. Also, the same DLP policy that's enforced if an S3 bucket becomes open, make sure there's some confidential data there. Or if a file gets introduced into Azure, make sure it is in malware, as well as what's happening in your container environments. The same platform that gives you telemetry, so they can look for behaviors that may indicate that something needs to be changed. So putting it all together, here are my takeaways for you. The first is assess your current state of risk. Work with your partner who can actually do this assessment remotely. Obviously, no shipment of appliances, nobody has to come on site. So can assess give you the state, that understanding of risk of where you are taking risk. That risk assessment could be narrow, like, hey, tell me how I'm using Microsoft Teams or Word, or Exchange or such. It could be broader, give me a broader assessment of risk across my entire stack. Give me the cloud security advisor view of my control and visibility matrix. You can start with very small key use cases. So you can start broad if you like, but you can also start narrow. So help me protect this particular use case right now. Maybe it's the shadow IT use case for untrusted apps. Maybe it's my use for AWS or Azure for my custom app environments. Maybe I want to make sure that my use of GitHub or Jira is appropriate in meeting my compliance requirements. Subscribe to that subset of the platform that addresses the needs that you have right now. But again, make sure it's a platform such that when you want to extend that, you don't have to do lobotomy, right? You can simply through a click say the same policy is specified, now applied here and here and here and here as well. Make sure that platform gives you that comprehensive zero trust, right? Because otherwise just controlling the front doors is not sufficient. You need to have equivalent controls on the side doors and back doors as well. Obviously, in your case, in the public sector, make sure it has the appropriate certifications. Enable automation. Automation is something that's easy to overlook, but automation is a gift that keeps on giving. Automation for the developers, automation for SOC teams. And the SOC context, one thing that the best platforms will give you is automation using MITRE. Because our SOC teams are familiar with MITRE, and if you can leverage your playbooks and your knowledge base and such, that today is used for other environments, but can also be used for cloud. That really gives you flexibility, that gives you automation, it gives you the ability to use your SOC teams to address broader needs as well. And again, to the extent possible, that notion of automation in the SOC teams. Today, most of MITRE is used for investigative purposes, post facto purposes. The best platforms will allow you to also specify sort of the shift left piece, allow you to specify what vulnerability, what configuration that if we closed it now would prevent problems in the future, right? So it becomes more preventive in nature as well. And my last advice to you is avoid friction, right? Make sure that the platform that you deploy enables your end users and developers and SOC teams, doesn't get in the way. Because in this day and age, friction is the enemy of security. And if you add friction, people go around it. You'll be left with an unhappy constituent and with poor security as well. I hope this is useful to you. I hope my experience was useful to you, that the takeaways would be focus on comprehensive zero trust, focus on a platform that gives you zero trust and those controls across the board, and look for automation to the extent possible. Thank you very much.
Coming up next.
Hello, everyone. I hope you are enjoying day 2 of CyberTalks this week. We've had some amazing sessions so far, and there are way, way, way more to come. I'm Jake Williams, Associate Publisher of StateScoop and EdScoop. In this session, we're going to talk about local government cyber threat intelligence sharing. To this day, I'm joined by Tim Lee, the CISO for the City of Los Angeles, Glenn Haddix, the CISO for Southern California Edison and the President of the LA Cyber Lab, and David Stern, the State, Local, Tribal, and Territorial Partnerships Lead at CISA within DHS. Thanks for being here, everyone.
Hey, thanks everybody. Thanks, Jake.
Thanks for having us, Jake.
So Glenn, I'm going to go to you as the president of the LA Cyber Lab. The LA Cyber Lab is kind of the anchor idea that we're going to be talking about in this session. It's been around for a couple of years now, but walk us through, obviously, your work with the Cyber Lab and what you've been up to in recent memory. Yeah,
so the Cyber Lab is a unique thing. This is, we talked about data sharing years ago, and the Cyber Lab's that next step. It's where we take action, we create an environment where you can share, but it's also where you can go and get help. So if you get a scan from DHS, you have people you can turn to and say, hey, what does this mean to me? How do I better do this? Because a lot of times in the past, we would share data with folks who didn't understand what it meant. So all you did was cause anxiety, but you didn't better improve their security. And one of the other things is we've got to remember the bad guys share everything. The good guys need to start sharing. So this is cyber's a team sport, and we got to act more like a team. So I'm hoping the Cyber Lab concept spreads across the country, and it will make small to medium businesses far safer.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tim, you're the CISO for the city of Los Angeles, obviously where the LA Cyber Lab is housed. Tell us a little bit about your work with the lab and what you've been up to in recent memory in that space.
Sure. As a matter of fact, the Cyber Lab concept or idea all original from Mayor's Executive Directive #2 on cybersecurity. And in that directive, it is to establish a group called Cyber Intrusion Command Center to coordinate the cyber activities with the federal and local law enforcement. And now there's a very small and close collaboration group, that first group that we built. And from that, we built the city integrated SOC. Now the integrated SOC is now daily average. We're handling about 1 billion security events. And then at the perimeter level, we are blocking about 7 million attacks, and also including endpoint level. So you can see that that's a massive amount of good threat intelligence source that we are available in the city of Los Angeles. From that, then we come up with like, why don't we just go one step further to share these good threat intelligence source with our partners and business communities? That's why the mayors in 2018 established the LA Cyber Lab and public-private partnership. And so today, ISOC, integrated SOC, is sharing, feeding the about 204 actionable threat intelligence to the LA Cyber Lab. And then now LA Cyber Lab is also one of the main threat intelligence that we are taking in. So that's how we contribute and how we consume and provide for each other.
And so Dave, you have that federal government perspective within CISA. CISA is a relatively new agency, but the work that DHS has been doing to kind of coordinate cyber across the state and local government space has been going on for quite some time in many forms. Tell us a little bit about how you at CISA are working with the Cyber Lab and what that brings you to when we talk about the recent history of your interactions.
Sure. So one of the things I'll mention is that we saw the great work that the Cyber Lab was doing, not just a public-private partnership in name, but actually working with a lot of the different large and small private enterprises in the city of Los Angeles and the surrounding area, also bringing in the Fusion Center, a lot of the other communities in that area. And CISA actually did provide some grant funding to help the effort. In addition to that, a lot of the information that we share, the Cyber Lab is able to put a localized lens on it and make sure that for a critical infrastructure sector or for the different types of entities that participate in the lab, like Glenn mentioned, that they're getting that localized lens on the information, understanding how it applies to them, and then they're able to talk to a community of their peers within the city, within the other partners in the Cyber Lab to better understand how to focus that information, how to apply that information, and get the best cyber risk management value out of it for the network defense of their organization.
So, folks tuning into this session are from cities, they're from states, they're from the federal government, they're from private industry. What advice do you have for them, Glenn, on how to gather and act on this massive inflow of cyber intelligence that they're receiving from their various sources? And how can this LA Cyber Lab fit into that?
Well, what I first recommend is they reach out to the Cyber Lab. One of the things that we have learned is a lot of small businesses do not understand the data that we tell them with cyber. Like I had said before, we create anxiety instead of a feeling of safetiness, right? Another thing that I'd recommend that they do is they get their small businesses comfortable with law enforcement, the FBI, the local police. There are so many misbeliefs about, if you get hacked, the FBI is going to come up, put yellow tape all around your business, and you're shut down. That can't be further from the truth, right? Knowledge is power, right? So I welcome all the other municipalities to reach out to the lab, learn from what we've learned, learn to get with your SSA, learn to get with your DHS. You have great partners out there who aren't going to violate your privacy. You know, when they do a scan of your business, they're not scanning your PII for your business. They're helping protecting you. If you don't understand, you can ask the lab, hey, what does this mean? The city should set up the same thing, and I think it would be a huge boost for their economy because their businesses would be safer, and it would make a much stronger business-government relationship.
Dave, at CISA, you're definitely right in the thick of all of the threat intelligence that cities, states, federal government, private industry is getting. How do you help them make sense of it? What are you telling them about that? And how are you encouraging them to get involved in efforts like the LA Cyber Lab?
Sure. So one of the recent concerns that we've had as it relates to state and local governments, but also critical infrastructure more broadly, is the threat of ransomware. And associated with that is the threat of commodity malware, things like Emotet and TrickBot. And so at CISA, we might share certain information regarding those specific threats, how we see them in the federal space, and from the perspective that we have looking at all of critical infrastructure kind of nationwide. We also work with the multi-state ISAC to try to apply that information for the network defense of state and local governments. But I think where the Cyber Lab comes in, and this just happened yesterday, so they released an Emotet alert that didn't just talk about the threat writ large and just how it relates to state and local government in general, but talks about, you know, putting it into a lens of the 6 counties that include the area of responsibility of the Fusion Center there, also putting into context for all the critical infrastructure organizations that work with the Cyber Lab. And they kind of do this as a joint product, a joint effort to pool their resources and better understand for our community, how does this impact us? Who can you call to learn more about it? And what are some steps that you can take to defend yourself?
And finally, on this topic, Tim, I mean, you are a city CISO, right? Your day-to-day job is taking in all of this threat intelligence. Tell us a little bit about your process for that, what you're doing in Los Angeles, and how the LA Cyber Lab plays a role.
Sure. You know, today's one of the main challenges that all the SOC team are facing is the threat log fatigue. And then that threat intelligence plays a critical role to help to address that kind of challenge. According to one study, that a good threat intelligence can cut down like 44% of the threat logs that SOC team need to handle. So that's a big help. But important thing is the good threat intelligence. So for my recommendation is the quality of the threat intelligence is more important than quantity of threat intelligence. So for example, at City of LA integrated SOC right now taking ingestion from 35 different threat intel sources, about 30 to 40,000 IOC daily. But we analyze it, and then by the time we feed back to Cyber Lab that when we share, we cut it down to 240 IOC. So that's a big cut down from 30,000 to 240. So that's another thing that Cyber Lab can do to the partners. So because it already filtered out and then a lot of noise and a lot of false positive for you before your SOC team need to hand them to the threat intelligence. Now when that's when threat intelligence become an actionable threat intelligence. So and LA Cyber Lab can help out on a lot of on this area.
So, you know, I think it's there are several information sharing and intelligence sharing operations across the US, maybe none as quite as sophisticated as the LA Cyber Lab. And so Glenn, I'm going to go back to you again for this one to kind of kick us off on this topic. Why is Los Angeles the right hub for this initiative? What makes it different? What can folks take away from how Los Angeles has structured this endeavor to bring back to their own communities?
Well, so what we found out originally in sharing, small groups share really well. And then as the group gets bigger, people stop sharing and just take. One of the things that the LA lab did was it brought some anchor large businesses in the city together, so you had that huge rich base of data. That was, it goes a long ways, right? And so like Tim said, you know, all the sources he has, all the sources I have, all the sources DHS has. And what we're doing now is we're taking the data and making it usable. And we have an advisory board. So if you're a small restaurant, a dentist's office, a doctor's office, you get this data, but you can call up and say, so what am I supposed to do with this? Do I have this blocked right? Do I have the right kind of firewall? Where we find in other sharing it, the last step is not included. That's why I keep saying you get rid of the anxiety. So you can actually call and say, what do I do with the data? Have I done it right? Right? And that's a huge step in changing the model. We're going from giving you information to giving you actionable things to do. And I think that model needs to spread across the country, and it will make these major cities of the U.S. far safer, and I think it'll make businesses more profitable.
Tim, here's your chance for the LA sales pitch. Why LA for the LA Cyber Lab? What makes it different? What makes it, from the city perspective, why is Los Angeles a different spot for something like this? And how can folks take stuff away and scale it in their own communities?
Sure. You know, LA is the second largest city in the nation. And then in LA alone, we have about 600,000 active business in city of LA. And that's a huge, huge partnership opportunity there. And then also we have a Cal State, UCLA, USC, academia sites. And then from the city of Los Angeles alone, like we have a massive amount of data, security related data that we're handling. And then that produces a lot of good threat intelligence tools. That's the perfect place to build the private partnership, public-private partnership for LA Cyber Lab. Now, LA Cyber Lab is not just the threat intelligence sharing platform. Threat intelligence sharing platform is one of the critical elements of the Cyber Lab, but Cyber Lab play a lot of roles in the cyber collaboration area. For example, Cyber Labs also play a role as a bridge between the business, between the academia, and then public side with the federal law enforcement that people don't have direct access to the federal. There's a lot of good service that provided by the federal side. So Cyber Lab also play a bridge in that area too. So we are hoping that this model will be able to duplicate and repeat across the nation, and in the future we can expand the network and connecting each other, become a cyber alliance.
Yeah, and Dave, you know, when we talk about expanding, when we talk about sharing across the country, obviously, you know, your role at CISA, state, local, tribal, and territorial, that's all of them. You know, you kind of cover all of those pieces. Obviously, at DHS, you have a huge role in the MSI stack, which is another information sharing organization. Tell me a little bit about how you're advising folks to spin up their own mini LA cyber labs and create that nationwide network.
Sure. So a couple things I would mention. So first, I think the city of LA has a governance structure and a model there that really facilitates not only all the departments and agencies in the city working really well together, but because they've already got that all decided and it's established how all the different departments work with Tim and his team. It's easy for them to then reach out beyond that and really look holistically at the city as a whole of what else can we protect? Who else can we include here on a holistic basis to include all the different organizations that we want to work with, that we want to share with to protect the city writ large. So moving from that, LA is part of a group. There is a coalition of big city CISOs is in the process of forming. It's kind of an informal group that I've been talking to and working with that includes LA and some other cities. And yes, CISA is here to kind of support looking at expanding this model, working with some of those other cities if they're interested, if they're ready, and helping them get the access to the information they need, the services they need, and the services for their partners so that we can be a good partner to them as well.
I'm glad you mentioned the coalition, Dave. Stay tuned for another panel later on in CyberTalks on that. We're super excited to talk to some folks from that coalition. So we have a couple minutes left, and I just sort of want to pull our conversation together. And Dave, I'm going to go right back to you to sort of kick off this last final note. How does the work that you're doing with the LA Cyber Lab, but also the work that you're doing around threat sharing and threat intelligence sharing across the nation, how does it scale into the future? What does our cybersecurity future look like with a more sharing and cooperative environment?
Sure. So the first thing I would say, as it pertains to the most recent question, is if there are more cities doing this, they are acting as force multipliers, not just for us, but they are helping better protect all of the organizations that work in their AORs, some of which are very small organizations that need additional support. Maybe they don't have resources. Maybe they don't have all the expertise that they might need. So that's one way. I think another thing, to use the Cyber Lab and the current model that we have with them as an example, it's not only just sharing information. There are also regular joint cyber threat briefs where our cybersecurity advisors, which are our field personnel, participate, as well as our folks from headquarters, and share information, there to answer questions and be a face and work collaboratively with the folks that are actually engaged with the city of LA. And then another area that I want to mention is with the information that we're receiving, it's not just coming to CISA and then we say, thank you for the information. We are working collaboratively with both the Multi-State Information Sharing Analysis Center, the MSISAC, and the EIISAC, the Election ISAC, to share information that we receive from LA and from our other state and local partners. And then that information is applied in various capabilities that they have at the ISAC to help protect the state and local community writ large. So you may have heard of the Albert Intrusion Detection System. There's also a new service they have called Malicious Domain Blocking and Reporting, where we can actually block malicious domains associated with phishing, malware, ransomware. And we also have an endpoint detection and response pilot for the elections community. So these are all different capabilities where we can apply that information, we can look in our holdings, and we can provide feedback to our partners like the City of LA when they're sharing information with us.
Glenn, president of the LA Cyber Lab, how does the work that you're doing through the Cyber Lab scale into the future? What does the future look like if you're successful?
I think the future is a great future. One of the things that I think when you do a force multiplier, bringing private companies together with the state and local government and the federal government, and they work cooperatively on a goal, that to the businesses, it's an environment they can't create on their own. Without it, they can't get there. One of the other big things that companies don't really get is a lot of good training. One of the things you get out of this is all the partner companies throw in training they do. So small companies who don't have the assets can get training on phishing, the basics. And that saves them money, and so they can concentrate on their business. I think there's no losing on this. This is a win-win for both the public sector and the private sector. This is something that I think every mayor would find out. If they went to their businesses, the big businesses around them, they would find a very welcoming community to participate together. And I think anytime we can do that, that's good for the citizens.
Yeah. And Tim, bring us home and pull this all together here. How does the work that you're doing in the city of Los Angeles, how does the work you're doing through the LA Cyber Lab scale into the future? What does cybersecurity look like in Los Angeles in the future with all this assistance?
Sure. Cyber defense collaboration is going to be future. And then currently, Cyber Lab is not only sharing the operation of technical threat intelligence, we are also sharing strategic threat intelligence and also a lot of best practices with our partners. And then not only that, Cyber Labs also provide a platform for collaborate and innovate. And so if you look at the current collaboration groups are focusing on prevention and protection focused partnerships. But in the future, these collaboration group will be maybe expanded to one step further into the detection and response area, now become a cybersecurity alliance, attack one, attack all type of thing. Then that will be making more stronger collaboration and alliance to protect the critical infrastructure in our nation backbone.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have left. But Tim, Glenn, Dave, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for sharing the LA Cyber Lab story. And thank you for bringing this community together. To Glenn's point, to reducing some of that anxiety. Thank you all for being here.
Great.
Thanks, Jake.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
And so that is the end of this session, but there is so much more Cyber Talks to come. We hope you enjoy the rest of it. Thanks so much.
Coming up next.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Wendy Whitmore. I lead the X-Force Threat Intelligence team at IBM, and we are responsible for working on behalf of our clients to manage and investigate incidents, to conduct threat intelligence, and to train our clients in how to most successfully respond to breaches and to contain them. So I'm here today to talk to you a bit about creating order amongst the chaos. So we're going to cover 3 topics that are relevant today in terms of what does the cyber threat landscape look like today, and then how are our clients and organizations throughout the world protecting themselves effectively against these threats. So that said, let's dive right in. I mentioned I've got 3 topics for you, right? So first is going to be related to the election, so the United States election and chaos surrounding that. Second would be related to threats to the COVID-19 supply chain targeted towards testing and vaccine. And then lastly is going to be a topic that I think everyone is super aware of, and that's ransomware. So let's get into it. So when we talk about elections and chaos, right, we're not just actually talking about changing the results. And I think that a lot of times when we talk about the election and security related to it, a lot of people interpret that to mean we're talking about, oh, okay, we're saying that results are going to be changed. And there's actually a multitude of ways that the election security can be impacted. And a lot of that actually has to do with simply creating chaos. And you can do that in areas that aren't related to just the results, right? You can do that related to influencing a wide variety of different congressional races as well as the presidential election. You can do that by creating chaos at polling centers. So meaning a lot of times the tabulation machines, which are used to check people into the polling center, those could be corrupted. They could then create extremely long lines, and then votes are not able to come in due to that, right, in a timely manner. So there's a whole lot of different ways, and that then doesn't even relate to things like critical infrastructure that may be disrupted. So things like power supply, news channels, those types of things that could be compromised in the days leading up to, and then actually even after the election. So there are a whole lot of different ways that multiple nation state actors can go about creating a bit of chaos that then breeds just uncertainty in our results and contributes to a widespread amount of chaos within the election. So something that I'd like everyone to be aware of for the next few weeks in particular, and then certainly afterwards as well. Keeping an eye on things that do they seem to make sense? And we're going to get into some best practices around, security that will apply to election and any type of attacks that we're talking about today. So the second area of the 3 that I want to talk about is the COVID-19 supply chain, and in particular, nation state actors targeting that supply chain to ultimately steal information related to vaccine research, vaccine testing, and then even ultimately when we get to things like the delivery of the logistics. So how do we actually deliver vaccines, right? We're talking about a very widespread supply chain, which includes everyone from biopharma research companies, universities, national health agencies, getting into the chemical and device manufacturing and compound companies, and then ultimately to the global logistics firms. These attacks, again, are pretty widespread. We have reason to believe that many nation state actors have transitioned these to be kind of their #1 target at this point, and we don't expect that that's going to change in the near future, right? We expect that certainly over the coming months and likely in the coming years, these are going to be extremely hot topics and hard target areas. So when we look at nation states, it's really every nation state actor that you can think of in the news that ultimately it has an interest in attacking these types of organizations. So the third group and type of attack on the cyber threat landscape that I want to talk about today is related to ransomware. And I'm sure that ransomware is not a new topic for anyone at this point. I'm sure you're hearing about it on a daily basis. I think, quite frankly, I think it's bigger than any of us in this space really ever thought it might get to. And that's due in large part to the attackers at this point, essentially taking some kind of business approaches to the attacks, right? So on a good news story spectrum, what we're not seeing is such new and novel types of malware that is being incorporated as part of the ransomware. So from that sense, it is absolutely detectable. The challenging part is that the adversaries have really divided the supply chain in a way that's effective for them. So in particular, we've moved to a ransomware as a service, and human operated ransomware as a service particularly, which means that attackers are specializing, right, in particular areas. So you may have one group that develops the actual pieces of malware that are used. You may have another group that manages the infrastructure and the command and control components of it. And you can actually rent both of those components as a service. And then if you're the actual ransomware operator, what you then get to do is specialize in embedding yourself in an organization and having a much more effectively executed use of the ransomware. So in particular, we've seen that change from the perspective of a shift to extortion, and as well recently a shift to denial of service attacks related to ransomware. And what that does, it gives the attackers multiple opportunities to monetize their attacks, right? So you no longer have simply an attack where you get hit with a piece of ransomware and the attackers say, hey, in order to get your data back, then you're going to have to pay, right? That still happens. But now what also happens is, and the Maze ransomware group is a great example of this, is this real kind of shift to extortion and naming and shaming. So in particular, attackers are saying, hey, not only are you going to have to pay us in order to get access to your files, but now actually we're also going to ask you to pay us so that we don't publicly name and shame you and out you to all your clients that your security wasn't as good as perhaps we think it should be. And then third, there has been a recent wave of denial of service attacks, in particular where the ransomware operator will attempt to steal your data and then also say, hey, we are going to release this unless you pay us, or we're going to conduct and wage a huge denial of service attack against your organization, which is going to then take your business offline if you don't pay us. So the good news is in the latter attacks, the denial of service attacks, those we are seeing not be nearly as successful, likely as the ransomware operators are hoping for. That's because they don't appear to have the amount of infrastructure to target at their victims that would be needed to wage a really large scale multi-terabyte per second attack. We highly encourage, though, that organizations are working with your service providers, in particular your upstream service providers, your network service providers, to make sure you've got protections in place for these types of attacks. But ultimately, when we talk about these types of attacks, what we're looking at are highly effective attacks with now multiple streams of payments and really pretty well organized from a process and organizational perspective from the attacker's part. So that said, I've given you now a kind of a number of areas that that are all areas to be concerned about, right, when it comes to the cyber threat landscape and effectively preventing these attacks, or at least effectively responding to them and containing them. So I want to really talk about that, right? How do we effectively do that? These attacks are coming at organizations pretty rapidly. We anticipate that certainly they're not going away, right? They're, especially as it relates to kind of ramping up to the US presidential election, we expect increased activity. And then even after that, I think we're going to continue to see that level of increased activity to do things like create uncertainty. And then that's going to also be coming at the same time as these attacks to the supply chain and as nation state actors are really ramping up to ensure that they've got the latest and greatest information on vaccines and research and testing. So a few things that I want to leave the audience with today. I could talk to you for days about all of the different things you could do, but let's focus just on 3 in particular. First and foremost, test your response plan. And what I mean by that is when we first entered into the shift, right, to working remotely, a lot of our clients said, hey, we need to get these new systems set up. We need to drive access to ensure our employees can access the data remotely, but we don't have any time to test, right? Because we've got to allocate resources to doing these other things. And while we certainly understand that in the early days, and you continually have to dynamically reprioritize, what we would say is there is no time like today, like yesterday or tomorrow to test your plan. So that's everything from how do you get a hold of employees who maybe now remote that previously were on site? How do you access systems that maybe you previously had a system on site that you used to access a particular environment or run a piece of response software or imaging software? Those are all the kinds of things you want to be testing, and then actually pulling in some specific scenarios. So things like a ransomware scenario into your environment. How do we work through that now remotely? And when we talk about backups, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, a huge part of having backups is testing them, testing that they work. So many organizations that we've worked with spent a good amount of money to have backups, but then didn't test them. And ultimately, when they found themselves under attack, didn't have access to the data that they thought they did. So moving into backups in particular, couple things there. Not important. It's not important that only that you have backups, but also that if and where possible, that you identify what your most critical and sensitive data is, and that you've got that backed up offline. We've seen far too many cases where organizations have had backups, but ultimately they were connected to the network at all times. And when that happened, then the backups were corrupted just alongside the primary devices as well. So we want to make sure that you've got offline data for your most critical and sensitive data, and that you're testing that that works. Lastly, patching. It's something that we all talk about, and I think it's kind of assumed, right? It's assumed that we're going to have a robust patching plan and everything's going to work out. But the reality is many organizations still struggle with this fundamental need. It's not as straightforward as it should be at times. And so we really want to make sure that for anything that's a critical level vulnerability, and potentially can be exploited, that you've got that patched within 10 days or less within your environment. As you can move down the stack in terms of vulnerabilities that may be a little less critical, moving those towards weeks to a little bit longer from a patching implementation perspective. But we want to make sure that for anything critical, we're getting that patched absolutely as quickly as we can, and that we've got a really well executed and programmed plan to do so. That's going to prevent your organization from having to deal with as much impact, right, when we get to these breaches. And it's really going to help your organization respond effectively and contain the breach as quickly as possible. Those are all things that we want organizations to focus on, and really to know that it's highly possible, right? While I've talked today about so many different attack vectors and that attack activity is higher than ever, what we're also seeing is organizations be more effective than ever because they have the right technology, they've got the right people, and they've automated and orchestrated their responses in a way that's extremely effective. So I wish each of you the best of luck. We're here, happy to help, but have a wonderful week at DC Cyber Week, and thank you for your time today.
The SNG Live Virtual Speaker Series is an opportunity to hear perspectives from today's most forward-thinking IT leaders from government and the tech industry on the most critical, timely, and pressing topics affecting government. These sessions are designed to be quick, deep dives into the topics defining this moment across the entire public sector. You'll hear from top C-suite decision makers and influencers on the front lines of transformation in the public and private sector. Be sure to tune in to the next SNG Live event, available to you live and on demand via sng.live. Coming up next.
Thanks for joining us at CyberTalks 2020, and specifically for a discussion on securing the cloud. My name is Dave Young, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Public Sector and Global Hyperscalers at Lumen Technologies, where we do amazing things. The panel today has a fantastic representation of both government and industry. Joining me today is Ashley Mahan, who is the Secure Cloud Portfolio and FedRAMP Director at GSA. Also with us is Brian Merrick, who is the Director of Cloud Programs with the Department of State. Finally, from industry is Greg Herman, who is a Senior Security Partner Strategist with AWS. So we have a couple of questions today, and what I found with these panels, it's best to build on each other's responses. And so as someone leads and you have an idea or would like to build on a perspective or embellish on an idea, feel free to add that near the end of the time we're talking. So I'd like to start with the first question for Brian. The pandemic has changed how we think about a lot of things in business and in life, and how government enables both its employees and delivers on its mission. What has changed with securing the cloud and applications in both a cloud and hybrid environment? And how are we thinking differently about this situation?
Well, yeah, as you can imagine, it's been a global event for us. We have over 275 posts overseas and hundreds of thousands of interactions on a regular basis. Mostly in the cloud now. And so, as the pandemic hit, really we were looking for opportunities so that we could improve our mission capability, especially around the areas of decision support. We had several burning mission issues the pandemic brought to light, such as deciding whether or not to close a post, or understanding what the local medical environment was like, or the infrastructure at the time. And so we really leveraged cloud heavily, especially with mobility as well. And I think those two things have been a common theme as we've moved through this last few months of challenge. And so what we've really done is moved into a space where we're managing enterprise applications in the cloud, basically allowing mobile access for our users so that they can enter real-time data. But then we took it another step as well. I mean, the cloud platforms were used, and of course we're in a multi-cloud. So we have many different platforms, especially SaaS ones really helped us to deliver on business requirements quickly and securely. And so we were able to basically, in conjunction with our chief data office, work with data owners and mission owners so that we could craft the right types of workflows and questions and surveys, back them up to our specific data sets that we wanted to capture, putting the right controls in place around those data sets, and then making that data available for larger consumption and analytics use to support decisions that senior managers had to make. And by doing that, we really kind of changed the discussion, and we moved the needle on the art of the possible when it came to the use of data and looking at data as an asset and a force multiplier as we were trying to tackle some of these really challenging problems. And so, as we did that, security was in the forefront. So we had to make sure that, we had our MFA enabled, that we had our identity solution in place, which is also in the cloud for our environments. And that enabled us to provide secure access to a lot of our external users that needed to interact with that data as well. So folks that wouldn't necessarily have normally been interacting on our networks. And so, as we kind of move into the next phases of this, I think there are going to be additional opportunities to provide enhanced security as we move forward, because the questions are going to keep rising, the problems are going to keep coming. And so as we're finding these solutions, those solutions are building on themselves. And I think we're going to see a lot more movement in hybrid, a lot more movement in providing enhanced mobile security, not just at the endpoint, but certainly also all the way to the data source.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Greg, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add?
Sure, yeah. From the industry perspective, I don't know that we're seeing a lot of new capabilities necessarily being developed yet. Obviously, adversity always leads to greater innovation. But I think what we're seeing is greater enforcement of existing security mechanisms, things like, obviously use of firewalls, MFA, more fine-grained access controls, network and system monitoring, all stuff that is part of a good security posture, but really reinforcing them. We're seeing that a lot more in the industry. We're also seeing that security professionals, we can't just be reactionary anymore. They're relying on predictive and proactive management, security management capabilities. Misconfiguration of resources in the cloud could lead to bad outcomes, can lead to bad outcomes anywhere. And so security professionals need to be monitoring this with real-time data, being able to detect misconfigurations and rapidly responding to them. So the one new thing that we are starting to see, and I don't know that this is coming about strictly because of the pandemic, is the incorporation of AI and ML technologies into those security tools. So you're not just detecting anymore, you're detecting and remediating in real time, as opposed to, just responding once you've been alerted of an issue.
I would add to what Greg just said, and also to Brian, that cloud has just helped the government be more resilient and shift to these new ways of working, during this time. And truly, now more than ever, our partnership with agencies as well as with industry has really made it possible for us to continue and enable our missions, while largely working from home. And since the pandemic began, FedRAMP, we've just seen a tremendous amount of growth just across the board in agencies working with cloud providers towards this FedRAMP authorization, cloud products entering the FedRAMP marketplace and becoming authorized and available for agencies to reuse. Just in fiscal year 20 alone, I think we had a 50% increase in the number of cloud products that are authorized be reused across the government prior to, in comparison to FY19. So, and then also just since March, agencies, they request access to look at these security products and to, determine if they want to use them. And we call them reusability requests. We had about 3,000 of them since March, which is really double what we would normally see. So we've really just seen, government and industry work hand in hand together during this time to, start using these innovative services, but also with a very strong emphasis on security.
Okay, great. It's really, I think GSA was a leading agency in telecommuting, and to see how quick you were able to pivot and work with industry during this time, Ashley, is just remarkable for how GSA was prepared to operate in these multiple environments. So Ashley, let's continue to have a conversation. I believe IT modernization is a lifestyle. It is not an event that we achieve or in a set period of time. How do you see IT modernization in relation with cloud technologies? And what have you focused on that has driven success for your organization?
Yeah, Dave, I completely agree with you. IT modernization is not just a point in time or just an event. It truly is a lifestyle. And that lifestyle has been adopted by FedRAMP from the get-go. While the FedRAMP program and the cloud providers that come through this process and demonstrating a ton of transparency and how they're implementing security has been just incredible, especially within this last year, as I mentioned prior. But it allows FedRAMP and these providers to focus on security, to have that emphasis on security, as well as cloud providers to innovate and bring these modern services to government more quickly. And so it's also through FedRAMP that the government maintains that visibility and understanding, really that window into how cloud providers are providing that care and feeding from a security standpoint, continuously through a government's, any government use case of any kind of IT product. And what I would say to agencies, what should you focus on? Perform that initial upfront effort, right? To select and to authorize, these cloud products that meet your needs, right? And then when you do, you'll have that partner with you to help you modernize. And FedRAMP, we're here, along the way to help facilitate that exchange, that security emphasis, right, on these cloud products and providers.
Awesome. Do you guys have like to add on to that one?
Sure. I totally echo everything you're saying on the FedRAMP security side. It's really been a lot of our shared platforms authorized in our agency much more rapidly than we could have done in the past. And with that, it's kind of changed the whole way we provide services. So instead of the traditional sort of, application box ownership where you own that application, all the data and everything in it, now it's more, we're moving into a shared environment where the central IT groups such as ours are providing those baseline infrastructure services for our business units that have many disparate needs to be able to build on rapidly and securely, knowing that they can inherit some of those baseline controls. And really the FedRAMP piece of it just lays the groundwork for that. And on top of that, one thing I would say just specific to change, I think what we're starting to see is we're changing the way we change, especially with the move away from waterfall and into agile. Instead of these large, painful, expensive, episodic changes, we're trying to make small changes consistently. So that way people get more used to change. The changes we make aren't as stressful to the overall system and to the environment. And we're able to also keep on top of the current state of our systems, which I think is going to really enhance our security as we start moving into more of a continuous monitoring type of standpoint. So one thing we did do recently is we changed our entire ticketing system and put that in the cloud, and we also can set up our configuration management database in the cloud. And so now we're able to scan our assets on our networks, our devices, our hardware, our software, and really know the state of that with certainty. And that's an operating picture that's been a challenge in a federated environment. So that's just one of the ways we're leveraging cloud and changing the way we look at things and the way we manage things to provide better security and a better operating picture moving forward.
Great.
Yeah, and I just wanted to jump in, Dave, if that's all right.
Sure. Yep.
Just some recommendations. I work with a lot of customers, both in the federal government, as well as, private sector companies that are supporting the federal government. And we have a number of best practices when it comes to IT modernization. First and foremost, always ensure executive managed sponsorship is there. And I don't mean just getting a document signed off, by a higher up to say, yes, proceed with this project. Understand the benefits that are going to be achieved when you go through these IT modernization strategies in development. If the executive leadership understands the eventual benefit, when you hit little snags on your path to your end game, they won't seem as severe. Your project won't get derailed. They'll understand that, yes, this is a minor issue now, but in the long term, the benefits we're going to gain from this project far outweigh the current situation or the current issue that you might run into. Also, for federal agencies, don't be afraid to leverage trusted experts. The cloud is new for a lot of organizations in the federal government, state and local, as well as even in private industry. But there are lots of organizations out there that know it well, backwards and forwards. And when you're trying to modernize your technology resources, there's a very, very small room for error. And having that trusted expert or advisor there to sort of sit on your shoulder and ensure you're being guided in the right way and doing the right things is vital to success, obviously. And then last and not least, always invest in your workforce. Don't rely, I just mentioned, trusted partners, trusted advisors, use them, but don't rely solely on them. Having internal resources that understand the cloud, that understand what you're attempting to accomplish with this IT modernization project or shift is important. Contractors come and go, personnel come and go. Knowledge management is key. So investing in your workforce is vital.
Awesome. Thanks. Really appreciate all three of you coming forward to share on that response there. So this next one, Brian, if you could lead us off. Edge computing is about bringing those compute resources closer to the point of the digital interaction. And it's fast becoming a critical element in the cloud world, especially with the latency-dependent applications, Internet of Things, AI. How do you see this natural evolution being adopted by the government?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely going to be adopted by those business areas that get the most value out of it, right? So it really comes down to the mission alignment first. In our environment, we have multiple customers that have mission critical requirements for edge computing that really have figured a way to manage by leveraging native cloud applications and capabilities, as well as hybrid solutions from on-prem. And I think we're going to see more of that. And really what we're seeing in our space is a move to basically provide better mission capabilities forward. So for instance, we have a customer that's collecting refugee data in austere environments overseas. And they're using a SaaS tool for the business processing of that. But that core data gets uploaded as soon as they hit the internet, because most of that collection happens outside of internet connectivity. And so then at that point, it has to go to another system, so it can become a data set that's used in a system of record to be shared across multiple agencies. And so we're starting to see more of that connection between different mission areas, data sets, different agency equities, and the cloud is sort of the glue in the middle that's helping us get that data where it needs to be a lot faster. Certainly in a global environment, having the compute and the data as close to user as possible is key. And so we're certainly looking at technologies that are FedRAMP compliant that will help us do that. And I think we're going to see a lot more evolution in that space, so that we can get to the point where we don't have to leave our boundary when we're doing these compute activities, but we can still do what we need to do as quickly as possible with the lowest latency possible. I'm really seeing the focus on that primarily for our programmatic areas, where that real-time processing and data sharing is critical, while the back office stuff is not quite as critical. So that will probably come, later on down the road. But I think, as we're in a good position to begin this. I think the moves that are happening on the policy side around TIC and other things are certainly going to make this easier to do than it would have been previously. So I think we're definitely moving in the right direction.
Great. Okay, I'd like to move on to the next question. Ashley, if you could start us off on this one. Today, security is part of any IT conversation. And by securing clouds at the highest level, have we experienced any performance impediments? What have we learned about working with cloud and security technologies? And maybe to the group, how do you see TIC 3.0 and cloud working together?
So David, this is another excellent question. So, I'm going to shift a little bit instead of performance impediments, but kind of talk about that end-to-end customer journey that we've done so much research into these last couple of years, and have heard loud and clear from our customers that authorization process, right, is too long, takes up too many resources. And so FedRAMP, what we're focused on is on initiatives, right, to help speed things up, right, for industry to get their innovative technology to government faster, and from a government perspective, for government to start using these innovative products faster. And so we've been working with two initiatives I'd love to talk about. One is our Open Security Control Assessment Language. We've been working with NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, and OSCAL is the acronym that you're going to hear me talk about. And so currently the authorization process in government is a pretty manual one. There are different security artifacts that need to be produced and tested and audited through this process. And all of it's done in from a manual standpoint, uploaded, provided to the government in a manual way, created in a very manual way. And so what we've done with NIST is we've developed a standardized machine readable language that we can take all these security artifacts and transition them in working with industry, largely industry and agencies, to this language that then we can apply machine learning and different tooling to it to get some of the efficiencies with that initial authorization, but as well as that continuous monitoring process and getting that more near real-time updates right into that security posture of that system. And that's really where our second kind of project that we've been working on comes into play. Again, in line with things being a little bit more manual, currently on our as-is state today, where we want to go is from a continuous monitoring, as you mentioned before, cybersecurity, IT modernization, it's not just a point in time, it is certainly a lifestyle. So continuous monitoring, that's where we get that continued into that security posture. And so today it's more of a manual process on getting those kind of snapshots, right, into that security posture. And what we'd like to do and what we've worked on is working on a web services API schema that we could use to maybe in a more automated way, get pulled information from cloud service providers that give us more of that near real-time information into the vulnerability posture, if you may, or configuration management, what's going on there of cloud products. And, what we've learned is, especially during this time, it's a constant evolution, right? Everyone, industry, agencies, we are all working together in the spirit of protecting, information. And at FedRAMP, we are absolutely committed to learning and listening from our customers and, evolving as well.
Awesome. Any final comments to add to Ashley there, guys?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that would be incredibly helpful. I mean, at least, where we're at, it's really about managing risk and dealing with risk tolerance issues. And so, we look at the ATO process as sort of establishing that baseline, if you will, of security control. But we really do want to take it to a much higher level. I think, what's happening with TIC 3.0 and the idea of, securing your data closer to your data is really where we need to be, because data is being reused in so many places that soon it's going to be very complex to manage that data architecture, if you will, when it comes to all the multiple endpoints. At the end of the day, we really want to protect that core data source. Obviously, going to be challenges on the industry side as we try to normalize that to the point that it's consumed. I think that that's something that will really help us as we all move forward. And certainly, if we can get better real-time threat data and integrate that into our compliance processes, it's going to help us make better risk decisions, better risk trade-offs between what the customer is asking to do and then what we're comfortable with from a risk standpoint. And it also helps us, will help us to put the right mitigations in place for specific activities we might be doing, which is really tough to do from just a straightforward compliance standpoint. So looking forward to that kind of enhanced capability as things move forward.
Great. I really appreciate you guys on the panel joining us today. Thank you. And thank you to the crowd for joining us to listen to us have a conversation about cloud security. We hope you guys enjoy the rest of the CyberTalks. And thank you for joining us.
Coming up next.
Hi there. Thank you for joining us today for this panel about the state of disinformation. We're here to talk about foreign interference, inauthentic behavior, and bots, especially on social media. I'm Jeff Stone. I'm the editor-in-chief here at CyberScoop, and I'm happy to be joined by Nina Jankowicz, who is a disinformation fellow at the Wilson Center and the author of How to Lose the Information War, and Graham Brookie, the director and managing editor at the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensics Research Lab. Graham and Nina, thank you again for being here. One of the things I want to start with is kind of a broad issue, but I'm hoping you can just kind of walk me through your broad understanding of it, which is, how is disinformation a security problem today?
Well, thanks so much for having us. Disinformation for us is a matter of terminology. Disinformation we define as the spread of false information with intent, meaning whoever is spreading that false information is meaning to manipulate the information environment. They're meaning to lie to people. They're meaning to mask their behavior. And so disinformation is a security threat because it's a form of corruption, first and foremost. From a security standpoint, we see it as corruption. Second of all, disinformation is designed to be a catalytic threat and B, target our main vulnerabilities. And by catalytic threat, I mean, if you apply disinformation to any given issue, a large policy issue, whether that's like hard cybersecurity issues or climate change or diplomatic negotiations or any of these things, it's going to be worse. You need to solve for disinformation in order to have a fighting chance or not be at least responsive to solving for any of those other large issues. And so cleaning up the information environment is step one. And that's a pretty good starting point for disinformation.
I totally agree with Graham, and I would just add that over the past few months, we've seen disinformation as a security threat playing out in really a stark context, not only on the backdrop of the COVID-19 crisis, but as we barrel toward the 2020 election. So two main examples, we've seen a lot of anti-vaccination disinformation, disinformation about the types of remedies for COVID-19 and safety measures. And that's had a real effect on public safety and security in our country. And then we have the democratic threat, right? And ultimately, disinformation's victim is democracy. It's not one political party or one candidate over one or another. And we're seeing that playing out right now with disinformation surrounding mail-in balloting. Ultimately, our country can't function if we do not have access to good information and people aren't given the tools that they need to navigate this increasingly chaotic information environment. And ultimately that affects their democratic decisions, not only who they choose in the voting booth, but whether they vote at all and whether they are, reaching out to their congresspeople, their elected officials, whether they're participating in the democratic process. And democracy doesn't work without participation. So ultimately, this is about each one of us. And each one of us has become a security issue at this point.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but I take your point that it's about being well informed, right? To be able to kind of have the right to self-govern. I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things that we've been thinking about is the way that the conversation has evolved around social media influence operations since 2016, when Russian intelligence leaked all of these emails from the Democratic National Committee. I think that had an effect, speaking for myself at least, thinking about this as a primarily foreign problem. If you're looking at Russia or China or Iran or somewhere else, does the source of disinformation matter, whether or not it originates in the United States or elsewhere, if it's causing your thinking and behavior to change about things like the virus, as Nina said?
I think disinformation is again a catalytic threat that doesn't recognize any of our uniquely defined borders, right?
Okay.
It's a truly transnational threat. And so when we're talking about the impact that disinformation has, when you zero into the moment where any given, our friends and family, what the social media companies would call users, what a media outlet would call readership, and what the government would call citizens, when you zero into the moment where they're scrolling online or sitting at their computers or whatever, the disinformation has the same impact on the audience. And so regardless of source, now sources of disinformation, whether hostile nation states or domestic actors, have different tactics, they have different approaches, and that's something that you need to address to have a comprehensive approach to this set of issues. But disinformation, again, is truly global. And so we're looking at, it's actor agnostic, essentially. And any approach to that is extremely important. The other component of that is that there's a large difference between foreign influence operations that include disinformation and just disinformation in and of itself, right? And frankly, the policy approaches or interventions that we would have to just disinformation in general are probably going to be pretty different than the policy interventions that we would have to a foreign actor trying to interfere or influence a specific thing using disinformation. And so when we look at this issue, especially in the United States, we have this tendency to think that everybody that disagrees with us on Twitter might be a Russian bot, and that's probably a little too simplistic, right? And if we're going to solve disinformation, then we need to look at our entire information environment. What media regulations look like, what social media's role in democracy looks like, et cetera, and on down the road. For our policy approaches to what Russia is doing in our elections right now, and since 2016, probably before that, that's going to be a more national security approach to a national security issue.
Right.
I would add a couple of things to that. So there has been a trend recently in our political discourse as we head toward the election, and this is partly because of the politicization of foreign interference. We're seeing certain individuals within the government trying to rank or outrank, Russian versus Chinese versus Iranian disinformation. And to me, as Graham said, it doesn't matter where it's coming from, it's all a threat to democracy. And that same maxim applies to things that are coming from within our borders as well. And my research shows across 5 Central and Eastern European countries that have been dealing with Russian disinformation in particular for much longer than we have. They recognize that it's a threat. Even in those countries that have that very clear, cogent recognition of the threat down to their national security doctrine, they've beefed up their cybersecurity, they have good counter-disinformation policies. There are still some countries who use disinformation domestically. And that means that they have this very incongruent policy. Their national security policy gets it, but domestically, they're using the very same tactics that Russian and Chinese disinformers are using on their own people. That should sound really familiar to viewers in the United States or anyone watching that has followed what's going on in the United States, because we have a very similar environment here right now. And I think that just, it underlines the fact that we need to be agnostic about who the actor is, as Graham said, and understand that ultimately it's the democratic process that suffers. This is not a partisan issue. And the more we politicize this, the more we're going to continue to be on the back foot in pushing back against this as a threat.
Nina, that you hit on another great point, and that leads to the natural question of have you identified any solutions?
Well, I don't think there's any panacea. And I know that's really frustrating. Everyone wants, the magic wand that's going to solve this problem tomorrow.
We want the silver bullet.
And yeah, exactly. And I think, 4 years ago when the revelations about Russian interference first came onto the scene, I was living in Ukraine. There was a huge emphasis at the time on fact checking in Russia's near abroad. And then we started down that same road here in the United States. That's one of the reasons I wrote my book, frankly, because it seemed like we were doomed to repeat the same mistakes that our Central and Eastern European partners had made. Another one of those kind of false starts is the desire to play whack-a-troll. And I'm sure Graham is intimately familiar with this with his work, identifying and tracking these networks. He knows just as well as me that, once we take those accounts down, it's really easy for bad actors to just recreate them. The investment that they have to make is very small, but the return on investment can be very large. Now, platforms have gotten better at detecting these sorts of things. There is obviously greater cooperation between the federal government and platforms, and citizens have greater awareness. So it's getting a little bit harder, but we can't just rely on social media companies to do this stuff. And we were talking a little bit before about how bad actors manipulate the fissures in our societies in order to turn us against each other, cause this discord. That's ultimately the goal of disinformation. So in my opinion, and from the research I've done in countries that have been dealing with this again for 10 to 15 years before we even woke up to the threat, we really need to invest in the resilience of our society. And it's something that's been kind of overlooked right now because, again, we all want that panacea, and investing in things like media and digital literacy, like greater cyber and IT hygiene for the general population, investing in civics programs, investing in our public media. These aren't things that are going to cause an instant change in our information environment. They are generational investments, but they do build a more resilient society over time. If you look at places like Estonia, Finland, Sweden, even Ukraine, which although they definitely are still on the front lines of the information war, they are a bit more ahead in their thinking than we are. They've all invested in stuff like this. And I think we've squandered the past 4 years politicizing this issue and not investing in these things that really shouldn't be political at all. These are things that create a more robust democratic discourse. And that's what this is all about.
Right.
Completely agree with that. I mean, the tricky thing about disinformation is that everybody kind of thinks of it as somebody else's problem. Right. Like we're all kind of looking at the social media platforms to say, hey, do something about this, or the government to say, hey, tell us something about this, or the media to, report completely objectively all the time and get it exactly right on breaking news events and things like that. And the fact is, it's a truly collective problem. For us, the way that we think about it is that it's going to require a lot of steps from government. It's going to require a lot of steps from the private sector, specifically technology and social media companies. It's going to require a bunch of standards in journalism that probably need to get a lot better. And most of all, it's going to require every single person to do their part. We all have a role to play, right, which includes, going the extra mile to make sure that what you're looking at is fact-based and accurate, but also engaging with people in your own information. I mean, the most effective thing that you could possibly do is talk to your friends and family about what the shared set of facts are that our democracy depends on. And that might feel really, really minuscule, but that's how this gets better. To Nina's point, that's how resilience gets made.
Graham, Nina touched on the idea of whack-a-troll, right? This idea that tell me if I'm wrong, but if we're not effectively imposing costs on some of the groups and actors that are doing this kind of thing, well, we've seen this already. We've seen this with some of the takedown reports from major social media companies that will say they have removed, for instance, a white supremacist group, and then there's another takedown not long after saying, oh, hey, by the way, they are using some of the same accounts and tactics that we've previously identified before. How does that affect your work?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because it makes the point that this work is iterative, right? I don't think it's weird or strange or abnormal to identify, expose, maybe take down part of a network and then find more pieces of that network later, or find the kind of next iteration of that network. I mean, bad actors who sow disinformation, disinformation is designed to kind of seep through the cracks of any policy that we make. And so it's going to be evolutionary, and the exposed piece is really, really important. To your point, yeah, absolutely, we have to impose costs, and one of those costs is, of course, exposure. Bad actors, generally speaking, don't want to be exposed. Unless you get into like the next iteration of that threat where the exposure might be a definition of success, which is where we're at with a number of the examples of foreign influence, for instance. And so for us, you have to understand the nature of the threat. You have to base that in data. And so the whack-a-troll approach does not work, but it builds a body of understanding. A better way to put that is the whack-a-troll approach is not a solution in and of itself, but it helps build facts and understanding in order to build broad-based decisions or policy interventions that don't have second, third, fourth order effects that frankly we don't understand right now and could make the problem worse.
Do you have anything to add to that, Nina? Is there any way to effectively disincentivize the people who are behind these things, or is it good for now that these kind of whack-a-troll situations are, it sounds like, leading to more information and data about how they're spreading in the first place, and we can kind of react to that, right?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think we need to remove these accounts when we find them, and the more transparency and oversight we have of that process is going to be, it's helpful for the research community and for policymakers, absolutely. Right now, you know, one of the things that I would criticize about the approach of some of the social media companies is the fact that we have to trust them pretty much for their version of events. We don't get to see the full picture of the takedown. And, you know, on the other hand, so Facebook operates that way. On the other hand, we have Twitter, which does put out a data set of all the takedowns, which has been really rich for researchers and understanding the networks. What I would love to see even more is coordination across platforms so that we can track cross-platform activity, because increasingly we're seeing the bad actors jumping from platform to platform. That's where we need a little bit more in terms of the research sphere. In terms of imposing costs, I mean, when you're talking about the Kremlin, it doesn't really matter what the costs are, right? Again, this is a pittance in terms of you know, the general Russian intelligence and covert operations budget, the stuff that they're spending on you know, the meddling, as everyone hates to call it, or election interference. These online operations are really just a small part of the budget. So without, you know, a major change in thinking or a change in relations between the US and Russia, which Putin recently floated, you know, we should sign a mutual non-interference agreement, which in his mind would cut off things like democracy support activities in Russia, which the US should not be prepared to do. And any administration that would consider that would be absolutely abandoning democratic values and ideals. Without that, I can't see that happening. And so we're going to get into, you know, a realm of sanctioning. We need to continue to draw red lines about what behavior is acceptable and what isn't. And the more we can do that with our allies in Europe in particular, I think the more effective that stuff will be. But that doesn't mean, you know, even if we're able to solve the Russian problem tomorrow, that doesn't mean we won't see China continue to develop its capacity, Iran, Venezuela, North Korea. I mean, the possibilities are at least 180 countries, right, that could develop this sort of capacity. And we need to be ready for that. And that's where the resilience question comes in, because just because it's Russia today doesn't mean it won't be one of the many other adversaries that the United States has tomorrow.
Right. One of the ways that we've seen this evolve is there's so much more visibility now around these campaigns. I know that it's difficult to determine whether they're successful or figure out ways to stop them in the first place. I think that you both are kind of putting yourselves out there in a way that identifies you as someone who is trying to stop this stuff, whether it be foreign or domestic. Has there been any blowback to your lives, or have you changed your behavior in any way after revealing some of these operations, and maybe there's something that hits that you didn't expect?
Yeah, so I've had one of these experiences recently, and I'm actually doing a project on gender and disinformation right now, so it all fits in kind of beautifully. When I was researching my book, I found that there are actually a lot of campaigns that are sponsored by states, nation states, that go against women in public life in particular. That shouldn't be surprising to anyone. These tropes are easy for anyone to use, including our adversaries. And so I've looked at cases in Ukraine and the Republic of Georgia where this happens. And recently it kind of came home to me. So I was talking about a Russian narrative that made its way into the right wing of American politics, debunking that narrative and kind of putting it to rest or trying to before it became viral. It had been aired on Fox News, so I kind of jumped at the opportunity to say, no, this isn't true. And it had directly to do with, the work that I've done in Central and Eastern Europe. And because of that kind of outspokenness, I have been dealing recently with a lot of right-wing trolls who are coming at me, and not just, having a normal discussion on the internet. I think what's been normalized in this internet era over the past 4 years in particular is the type of ad hominem attack that we would not, entertain in polite society. We used to not entertain anyway. And it's so easy for people to do this in the anonymity of the internet, to, denigrate someone's physical appearance, to insult them. To one thing that I've gotten has, again, to do with gender, and that's people sending me pictures of empty egg cartons, because apparently women in their 30s are good for nothing anymore because our egg supply is depleting. And I, of course, vehemently reject that. But this sort of thing is meant to, again, to shut people up, basically, to silence people, to get them to say, do I really want to participate in this conversation anymore, or should I just disengage? And it's a very similar tactic to what we see coming from foreign adversaries as well, to flood the zone, not only with bad information, but with just low quality discourse. And that's what gets people to disengage. So I think the tactics here, surprisingly, are very much in line with one another, whether it's coming from the Kremlin, who's denigrating women in Central and Eastern Europe, or whether folks, and I should add, it's not just the right. I have also received some abuse from the far left as well, denigrating women in the public space here. And again, this is just underlining the fact that whether these tactics are foreign or domestic, actor agnostic, they are a problem to our democratic discourse, and they affect people's ability and desire to participate in the conversation.
Completely agree. The experience that Nina's going through right now is egregious. It's harmful. Right. It's designed to make us feel alone rather than have some amount of commonality, and it's terrible. There's no place for it in the discourse most broadly. For our work, the first priority, because we have teams, on 5 separate continents, and we're reporting in a bunch of places where physical security is absolutely as a concern. That's the first concern, full stop. When we were looking at online engagement, online networks, online behavior, online content, and online harms in particular, there are very real consequences in the real world. And so the first absolute priority for us is the physical security of our teams, wherever they are, whether that's in Brazil, reporting on politics in Brazil, whether that's reporting on harassment in the Philippines right now, whether that's reporting on issues that are ongoing in Ukraine or in Tbilisi, Georgia, right? Any place that we're reporting, there are real world implications for the online engagement by those who are trying to A, spread disinformation, and B, engage in online harm. And so without a very, very clear understanding of what that threat looks like, it's extremely difficult to get any work done on this set of issues and make progress against it.
Have the threats intensified against your team in the international space, Graham?
Yeah, absolutely. We've done any number of reports on actors who are engaging on legitimate online harm, right? Like absolutely targeting of opposition figures, targeting of journalists in particular, targeting of very specific groups, whether those are minority demographics, whether that's women in particular, of course, and that's extremely harmful. So our team, there's been a case in the Philippines recently where we reported on a network a specific type of behavior. It's called red tagging, and it has led to the deaths of 2 opposition figures over the last 2 months. And I'm thankful that we don't have a team on the ground in the Philippines right now, and that's for a very specific reason. We've been doxxed by state actors. We've had, if you would like to know what my bank account info is, I'm sure that you could probably find that online. It's shut down, so don't use it. There's not much money in it to begin with, but there are very real consequences for trying to do this work, and being an actor that is in public doing this work. Nina knows that more than the vast majority of people. on a very visceral and personal basis. And it's something that we have to kind of take into account when we're starting to do a project or any amount of this work.
I would just add, there's one important thing for the audience here today, and I think that's we often overlook the individual costs and the ways that our employers or organizations that we're affiliated with can support that. So if you have reporters or investigators who are working on this threat, not only do they need, physical security in some cases, like Graham has outlined, but employers really need to be investing in things like, subscriptions to anti-doxing services for their analysts, investigators, reporters. But you also need to provide that psychological support and camaraderie because these things really do take a toll. And so I think that's just important to underline because in a normal organization's HR structure, this isn't something that often comes up, but it is becoming more normal. And so whether you're a think tank or, a media organization or a cyber analysis firm, these are all things that you should be taking into account for your employees during a time when the online discourse is becoming increasingly personal and can translate to threats in real life as well.
I wish we had more time. I could bug you with both with questions through the afternoon, but I will let you get along with your important work. Thank you for doing that, and thank you for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure.
Yep, thanks for having us.
Coming up next.
I hope everyone is enjoying CyberTalks. My name is John DeSimone. I'm the Vice President of Cybersecurity Training and Services at Raytheon Technologies. I'll be moderating a panel today on election security. Joining me today on this panel is Benjamin Hovland, Chairman of U.S. Election Assistance Commission, Matt Masterson, Senior Cybersecurity Advisor at CISA at DHS, and Jack Cable, Election Security Technical Advisor at CISA at DHS. Gentlemen, I'll ask each one of you guys to give a little bit more of a background of yourself when I ask you to respond to the first question. And obviously today we want to give our audiences as much information as we can, so feel free to dive in and interject anywhere you see fit. I'd like to kick us off with the first question and ask each of you guys to kind of answer the question in order, if you will, and I'll walk you through it. How can government entities and industrial base and security companies work together from a mission assurance perspective to help defend the system of systems that defines elections and improve voter confidence and perhaps turnout? So Matt, I'll kick it to you first if you'd like to dive in.
Yeah, John, thanks so much and really appreciate the opportunity to be on this panel. My name is Matt Masterson. I lead the election security work at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Prior to being at CISA, I was actually a commissioner at the Election Assistance Commission and then worked in Ohio as the IT lead for the Ohio Secretary of State, helping to run elections there. So my background's in election administration and now working with CISA, working with all 50 states and thousands of local jurisdictions to help secure the infrastructure that run elections. I appreciate this question because it's been a huge focus for us at CISA. We recognize that this isn't just a state or local government challenge, a federal government challenge. This is a state, local, federal government, and private sector, as well as just American citizen challenge. And so bringing in and working directly with the private sector, whether that's your voting system providers, your voter registration providers, threat intelligence companies, social media companies, you name it. Our goal is really to identify the best sources of information, the best analysis around risk to the systems that run elections, and push it out to the state and local election officials across the 8,800 jurisdictions that we have here in the United States that run elections. And so for us, it's really been a matter of identifying and working with anyone and everyone that can bring some value, that can have a conversation with our state and local partners and help manage the risk to the systems. And to give some perspective on that, we have created, as is typical in a critical infrastructure sector, an information sharing and analysis center. And the Elections Information Sharing and Analysis Center has almost 3,000 members. The reality is it reaches about 6,000 local jurisdictions because states like Michigan and Wisconsin push the information to their localities. And we're sharing everything from intelligence from the intelligence community to threat analysis from private sector firms to risk analysis that we have based on the visibility that we have into the sector. We have intrusion detection sensors deployed across all 50 states on the election infrastructure. We're constantly getting a feed of information from state and local officials and able to take that in, ingest it with our federal partners, some of the private sector companies we work with, and then push out, whether it's technical indicators, general risk information, threat updates, whatever the case may be. And in the lead up to the election, we're having literally weekly calls with the election community to discuss the current threat environment, to discuss the current activity, and push whatever information we have to them to help them manage risk to the system. So this whole of nation response, this coalescing around our democracy is really critical and a real focus for us at CISA, and probably the biggest area of improvement from 2016 to 2020.
Thanks, Matt. That's great. Jack, you have any thoughts?
Yep. Yeah. First of all, thank you, John. I'm glad to be here at CyberTalks. My name is Jack Cable. I'm an election security advisor at CISA. So I work under Matt, focusing on helping CISA identify vulnerabilities in election infrastructure. And I'm glad that you brought up the point that it's really a system of systems, because as we know, it's the states and counties that and local election jurisdictions that run elections, not the federal government. So while we're all here from the federal government, our role is more to advise these local election offices on how to best run their elections. And because of that, we have a heavily decentralized election process. There's really a wide range of election infrastructure that we have to protect. And part of that is kind of what we think about as election infrastructure. So when the average person thinks of it, they might think of the voting machine that they're interacting with when they're voting. But really, there's a much broader range of technology that's used in elections that can be anything from what you interact with at the voting booth, the voting machine, machines used to tabulate votes, electronic poll books, but then even further, there's systems to register to vote. Online voter registration is very common, as well as, say, election night reporting systems. So all of these technologies combined make the election infrastructure, and that's what we're focused on defending. And because of that, we have to take lots of different approaches. As you can imagine, what's needed to secure these voting machines is much different from securing this internet-connected election infrastructure. And to give an example of this, one of the projects that I came into work at CISA on, so I started at CISA in June, taking a break from studying computer science at Stanford. One of these projects is a tool called Crossfeed that I've been developing. So I started this over at the Defense Digital Service under the Department of Defense in order to help identify vulnerabilities in infrastructure there. We open sourced it and brought it over to CISA, and we are now using this to scan the online internet-facing election infrastructure of states and counties. And what's unique about this is the first time that CISA is performing scanning on an opt-out basis rather than opt-in. So we are taking a look at election infrastructure across the country. We're doing what we call passive scans, so pulling in from third-party data sources as well as light web scraping. And we're doing this in order to identify the most critical vulnerabilities out there and notify the states and counties when we find these. So we see this as kind of a natural evolution of CISA's role here in proactively identifying these vulnerabilities out there, helping states and counties fix them before they can be exploited. And we've gotten some feedback from states that this has been helpful in identifying flaws that they previously hadn't been aware of. So that's something that we hope to continue, just to overall protect this wide range of technology that makes up elections, because it is so diverse and there's no one thing you can do to secure it.
Great, Jack. Thank you. That was very good. Ben, how about you?
Thanks, John. Great to be here. Great to clean up on this one, because a lot of great things have already been said. So my name is Ben Hovland. I'm chairman of the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. For folks who aren't aware of the EAC, we're a small agency. We're a bipartisan independent agency. We were created by the Help America Vote Act of 2002, which was essentially Congress's response to the Florida 2000 election. And so all we do is elections, but it's great to have federal partners like CISA. And really, to your question, we've seen this sea change in information sharing since the critical infrastructure designation. and a real improvement in the elections community as far as sharing that information, making our systems more secure, or equipping people to do that. Like my colleague said, the first and foremost thing you need to think about elections in the U.S. is that they are decentralized. But through the governance structure of critical infrastructure, we're bringing the right people into the room, federal, state, local partners, along with private industry, to be able to have some of these conversations. The development of the ISACs or in the election space has been a big part of that. And as we continue to put out good information at the EAC, one of the things that we did this year that I'm very proud of, we partnered with the Center for Tech and Civic Life to help get cybersecurity training out there, a 101, 201, 301, because you really do have just a wide variety of the jurisdictions, both size and capability. So you have places like LA County, where they've got, I think, about 7 million registered voters. And of course, a lot of resources that come with that, to very small counties where the election official may be the only staffer. And so, again, providing some of that baseline information. And then I think we look at the other ways beyond that we can strengthen the space. Some of the programs that we've seen happen recently with some of the congressional funding are Cyber Navigator programs. I think those are a really great effort that recognizes some of the challenges that people will have at the county level, and has state employees with regional responsibilities that have that cyber expertise. And so I think that's a piece of the puzzle. Again, some of the other things that my colleagues have talked about on the voting machines themselves, that's one of the things we at the EAC do, a voluntary voting system guidelines. We're in the process of an update. It's long overdue. That needs to happen as soon as possible to increase sort of that baseline of technology that is in the voting machines. But as Jack mentioned, it's far broader than that, as far as statewide voter registration databases, e-poll books, election night reporting. All of these are outside of the scope of the voluntary voting system guidelines. And so exploring new ways to recognize those risks, mitigate those risks, are all a crucial part of, and getting that information again out to, as Matt said, the nearly 9,000 jurisdictions. So it's a significant task, it's a challenge, but again, the elections community has really stepped up and is doing a great job improving this space.
Thanks, Ben. So the next topic I'd like to throw out to you guys is, if we think about information or misinformation that's out there regarding either election security or just general concerns around the elections, as you guys well know, obviously, people going through and trying to understand how they feel confidence in their vote, the vote's going to be counted, or confidence in the general election, whether these concerns are real or perceived. A lot of the information that's out there are driving some of the public opinion. So what advice, or whether it's technologies or best practices, or how for registered voters to deal with the sorting through all this type of information, guidance can you give them? I'll throw it out. Who would like to jump in first? I'll let you guys pick who wants to go first.
I'll jump in with a first and foremost fundamental. The National Association of Secretaries of State has really taken the lead this year on a Trusted Info 2020 effort. It's a big deal. Like, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there, both foreign adversaries, but also, well-meaning people. The reality is social media doesn't stop at the state line. And so what may be good for you, for somebody in one state, isn't right for you in another state. And so it's important to get people to that trusted source information, which is absolutely their state or local election official. We want people to engage, but there are deadlines that matter. There are procedures that matter. And the person that is the right person to get that information from is your state or local election official.
Yeah, John, I'll build on a little bit of what Chairman Hovland just said. From our perspective at CISA, our work is focused and has started with the state and local officials, and then the private sector that supports them, creating a community of practice, and then empowering them to go talk to their voters, right? In the end, elections are run at the state and local level for a reason. That reason is so that citizens can engage directly with those who run the process, right? So if they have questions, if they have concerns, going and engaging directly with those trusted sources of information that Ben mentioned, secretaries of state, your local election administrator, is really critical because it varies so much state to state. And the best way to do that is to serve as an election worker. There's still time in many states, but even if you can't do that, if you don't feel safe, there's plenty of opportunities to watch pre-election testing of systems, to participate as an observer, and to engage directly with those who run it. Many election offices now even run Facebook Live or live streams of counting processes and tabulation to open up the process so that there's some transparency. And in the end, for this election, amidst COVID, really what we at CISA and the EAC have really been trying to engage voters around is being a 3P voter. And what's that? First is being a prepared voter, having a plan, understanding what your options are to vote, knowing how you want to engage with the process, knowing that you're registered, what's on your ballot, and what the experience is going to be like, because it's different perhaps in your jurisdiction than ever before. So understanding, having a plan, a prepared voter is a resilient voter. The second is a voter that is patient. We know that some of the processes are changing. We know there's expansion of absentee or mail-in voting or additional options for in-person voting. And as election administrators have worked quickly to do this, you may have to have patience while you're waiting to receive your ballot, or at the early voting site while you're socially distanced 6 feet apart, or for election night results and completing election night results. None of that means there's anything wrong with the process. It means that election officials are ensuring that it's both accessible, secure, and safe for voters to go and engage. And then finally, a participating voter, a voter that's engaged, that's asking the questions, that's talking to the local election officials in order to have confidence. And one key metric on all of this that we really like to highlight is in 2016, 85% or so of ballots cast were auditable, had a corresponding auditable record. This year, we anticipate 92% or more of ballots cast will be on an auditable record. And so we have the ability now, more so than we did in 2016, and many states have moved off of unauditable systems towards auditability. We have the ability, if we need to have transparent audits, efficient audits to ensure that votes are counted as cast. And so understanding those options and improving the auditing process is a real focus for us, not just this year, but moving forward.
Great, thanks. Thanks. Jack, you want to weigh in?
Yep. Yeah, just to build a little on what Ben and Matt said, underscoring some of the disinformation that CISA is anticipating. CISA has put out a number of PSAs about potential means of disinformation that could be spread. And the purpose of these advisories is to really show the public that, yes, disinformation may be spread, but ultimately what matters is that votes will be counted, they will be verifiable, and the results of the election will be correct. So for instance, one of our advisories talks about disinformation related to reporting on election night. An adversary, for instance, could claim that the, say, results of the election were different from what they're reported, or perhaps, as we know, if election results take a bit longer than they usually do, with perhaps the vote total on election night not being exactly the same as the final vote tally, there can be disinformation spread around that. But the key component with all of this is that we can trust the process that counts the votes. We can trust the process that certifies these votes, and we can trust that the ultimate result of the election will be correct. So voters must not let, say, disinformation or just other perhaps misleading reports on election night mislead them that the process is untrusted, because ultimately we can trust the process. And to talk about some of the technical measures that Matt mentioned, as he said, we can expect over 90% of ballots cast this election to have a paper trail. And that means that election officials can go back and check their work to make sure that the result of the election is correct. So there's a concept known as risk limiting audits, which is one way of auditing election, where the number of ballots tested is equivalent to the margin of the race. So as the race gets closer, more ballots are counted to ensure that in the audit, to ensure that the results are correct. So risk limiting audits, as well as other types of audits, are more in use across states and provide more confidence that the results are actually correct. So I think ultimately what we need to get to voters is that we have a robust process to ultimately certify the election results and ensure that they are valid. So voters need to trust that process and know that disinformation will not get in the way of that.
Great, thanks, Jack. So with the elections coming up on November 3rd, you know, it's obviously clear that there will be many ways to cast your vote. So what advice are you guys providing to election officials administering ballots on how to handle data integrity, voter authentication, or various types of voting, you know, in person and mail, online, so forth? And how confident should the public feel in these systems? And what advice, if any, are you guys giving on solicited versus unsolicited ballots?
I'm happy to jump in. Or
go ahead, Ben. Go ahead.
All right. First and foremost, and this goes off the last question a little bit. One of the things that certainly I have the privilege of seeing in my job is some of these back-end processes. And again, there's often many of these are open to the public. There are transparency mechanisms put in place, but I think there's really a misconception oftentimes about the number of checks and balances that are involved in elections. The totality of the elections process is usually one that it has filled with controls, whether that's having bipartisan teams in the polling place to ensure that everyone is following the rules, to having bipartisan teams in other aspects of it. Again, we talk about the canvass and certification process or how election night results are always unofficial. That's because in the canvass and certification process, I've been saying you're double or you're dotting all the I's, crossing the T's, and double checking the math. And so each of these processes is part of that. You mentioned there's been a lot of talk about mail ballots this year. One of the things that's kind of amazing is the life of its own that's taken on. We know the EAC conducts a national survey called the Election Administration and Voting Survey. We know from that 25% of Americans voted on a mail or absentee ballot in 2016. So what we're talking about isn't particularly anything new. The volume is going up this year. I mean, it will probably be a record number, but these are processes that people have had in place. The difference between a solicited or unsolicited, if that's what you want to call it, there are states like Oregon and Washington and others that automatically send a ballot to registered voters. But that has been a state legislative decision that's been made, and the voters that live there know and expect to get that ballot in the mail. For most states, you request an absentee ballot, and again, you fill out those instructions, and there are safeguards put in place to make sure that that is secure and accurate. And again, what we hit here is really the sweet spot for election officials. There are these safeguards put in place throughout the process to ensure that accuracy. It is what election officials do. It's what they expect, and they do a great job of it.
Yeah, John, for us at CISA, as COVID's really shaken up the approach in many election offices, as election officials have worked really hard to meet voters where they are, to understand that they're going to need to adjust to serve voters. Each state and in some cases, each locality has had to make decisions around how they can adjust the process to offer a safe and secure voting process. And so for CISA, EAC, and our private sector and government partners, we created 16 what we call swim lane documents. And these documents really focused on, one, understanding what changes were being made, whether that's expanded absentee, different approaches to in-person voting, like using large venues like stadiums or arenas, or drive-through or curbside voting. And then providing some risk advice around that, helping to give them tangible steps that they can take as they adjust their processes to respond to COVID to ensure a both safe and secure voting process. And so our focus really was understanding on where they were, what changes they were making, and then providing those steps that they could take in order to implement those changes. Because what we know is, as Ben said, many of these practices were already in existence in a lot of election offices. They're either having to scale up or change, sort of what's offered. And change doesn't come easily in election offices. Most election offices, you're going to pilot something, then you're going to expand it a little bit. You're going to take 2 or 3 years. We know in the midst of COVID, they've had to bring about some changes very quickly. And so whatever advice we could bring to keep safety and security top of mind around the infrastructure, that's what we want to do. And so those are available on both the EAC's website and CISA.gov/protect 2020. And then the final point is there's been a ton of conversation around absentee balloting. Understandably, it's being scaled up in many states. That the vast majority of Americans are still going to vote in person, whether early or on election day. And so ensuring that election officials have the resources, the support they need to manage an in-person process in the midst of COVID was a real focus for both us in the EAC. And so it's not just about absentee balloting. It really is about meeting the voters where they are and how they want to participate and ensuring that they're safe while they cast their ballot and that they can have confidence their vote will be cast. And the final point is, because the question had this question, kind of implied this, voters don't have to trust us, the election officials, in order to be reassured. They can participate directly in the process. Again, it's why we run it at the state and local level. So if they have questions or concern, get involved in the process. It really is the best way to have those questions answered, and you'll learn a lot.
That's a great point, Matt. Thanks. Jack?
Great. Yeah, on that point, just to dive a little deeper. So one of the methods you mentioned, for instance, online voting, CISA has come out and said that we view this as higher risk precisely because there is no paper trail compared to, say, in-person or mail-in voting, where we do have that audible paper trail and can conduct audits on the votes. So fortunately, online voting is not widely deployed. It's used in a few states, often just for, say, military or overseas voters. So that is not a huge concern for CISA, just because it isn't deployed very widely. So in terms of thinking about the risks of these different voting systems, the most important component is that people vote and that they trust that their vote has been counted. So whether people want to vote by mail, whether they want to vote early in person, whether they want to vote in person, really ultimately what matters, and the only thing that matters, is that people get out and vote, that they make sure that their vote is counted. So we recommend election officials to provide the resources that voters need to vote safely and securely. But then voters have the choice on how they want to vote in a way that they can verify that they're participating in this process. So because of that, Matt mentioned the 3 Ps of voting, and having a plan in terms of how you're going to vote, where you're going to vote, whether it's by mail, in person, following through with that. But further, perhaps if you are able to do so, aiding your fellow citizens in the process. So if you're healthy, able to do so, serve as a poll worker. It's one of the best ways to help out in the process. And beyond that, follow the other components, of course, as well, being patient for election results. So ultimately what we view is that the public needs to be confident in these results because we are confident in the results and they can verify that the processes are working as intended. What we view as the most important component of election security ultimately is voter confidence. So voters are the ultimate verdicts of whether an election is secure, whether it's safe, and they need to trust that these processes are in place that have been this way for hundreds of years, that we can certify results, that we can verify that votes were counted as they were cast. All of this combined leads to this trustworthy election process, and voters can see this play out. They can see that this is actually why the election should be trusted. So because of that, we really, ultimately just view voters as the last line of defense in ensuring election security, and it's important that they recognize their role there and stay vigilant in face of, say, these expected foreign adversaries.
Thanks.
And John, one quick thing I'd throw onto that is just, again, absolutely echoing the sentiments of my colleagues there, but, this goes back to when we were going through the swim lane documents, the working group documents that Matt mentioned, talking to election officials. One of the things you consistently hear is about, with some of these changes, the need for voter education. And I think that's one more reason to emphasize the Trusted Info 2020 effort and getting people to go to their state and local election officials. Some people may have voted in a particular polling place most of their adult life or for a long time. but maybe that's a senior center and it's not available this year. Or Matt mentioned, we've seen some arenas make themselves available for larger centers. So again, it may be a little different this year. Again, there'll be PPE, there'll be social distancing. You may want to participate in a way that you haven't through the mail or otherwise, or early in person for the first time. And so those details and how you engage and getting that voter education component comes from your state or local election official.
Great, no, thank you. All right, guys, so as we're wrapping this up, what's the one sound bite if you wanted people to take from this panel, the takeaway you'd like them to stick in their brains and continue to think through this election process? What's the quick sound bite?
Yeah, for me, it's absolutely that we all have a role to play in securing this election, that voters are the last line of resilience. And so the best response to our adversaries' attempts to undermine confidence and erode our democracy is an engaged, participating electorate. So all of us need to embrace that role and engage in the process.
Thanks.
I'd echo that. I'd say, absolutely. First and foremost, vote, make a plan to vote. We're getting pretty close. If you haven't done it already, want to vote a mail or absentee ballot, that needs to go in the mail ASAP. Explore your early in-person options, and think of election day as the last day to vote, but absolutely vote. Again, that's a big part of it. And it's a big part of having confidence in the process, making sure the process works, is the people engaging in it and doing their part. So, help a friend, help a family member, but make sure you have a plan and figure out how you're going to participate this year and do it as safely as possible.
Yep, yeah, I would agree with all of that. I think going back to the 3 Ps that CISA and EAC have laid out, we need to be prepared. So have a plan to vote. Like Commissioner Hovland said, the clock is ticking. So get those mail-in ballots in, or vote early, or vote in person on election day. Be a participating voter, so vote, but then encourage your friends, your family to vote. Serve as a poll worker if you are able to do so, to help others in your community to vote. But then lastly, be a patient voter, because election night may look a little different this year, but as we've talked about, that isn't a cause for concern. It just means that we're taking more time to certify the results and ensure that ultimately we can trust the election results. So listen to your local election officials and be sure that ultimately we can have a secure and safe election this year.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank all the distinguished panelists for sharing their insights into this very extremely important topic today. We thank you all for joining us today, and we hope you enjoy the rest of CyberTalks. Thank you.
We face cyber threats every day. Learn more about cybersecurity and how it affects all that we do by tuning in to CyberTalks TV, presented by CyberScoop at 8:30 p.m. on Fox 5 Plus WDCA, featuring interviews with top leaders in the industry and looking deeper into the world of cybersecurity.
Coming up next.
Hello, my name is Tom Kellerman. I'm the head of cybersecurity strategy for VMware Carbon Black. Today, I'd like to present to you a topic called cyber escalation. Look, it's been one crazy year, and COVID has not only changed the way we live, but it has enabled cyber criminals and cyber spies to be empowered. The worldwide threat assessment by the US intelligence agencies noted that cyber and cyber crime is now the #1 threat to the United States of America, even surpassing the threat of terrorism or weapons of mass destruction. This is compounded with the fact that we're dealing with a cyber insurgency. We're literally dealing with adversaries who are attacking us from inside out, who already have points of presence amongst our infrastructure and trusted information supply chains. There's been a 238% increase in cyber attacks since January. You're seeing this reality due to a number of facets. Number one, the tipping point is largely because there's a dark web economy of scale now that is the 3rd largest economy in the world, according to the World Economic Forum. And in so much, within that dark web economy, you see this service provision of hacking capabilities, as well as hacking services, compounded with the unique development of munitions that can bypass perimeter defense. You're seeing nation states like North Korea and Iran being truly empowered in this environment and leveraging A-team-like level of attacks against US infrastructures and commercial entities. Finally, you're seeing a greater knowledge of interdependence and interdependencies that exist within sectors. hacker crews, cyber criminals, and spies are recognizing that, there are these communities of managed service providers and points of presence in the information supply chain world that can be used to attack an entity who is secure. According to our data, 82% of the 3,000 CIOs and CISOs whom we surveyed noted that cyber criminals and spies are becoming much more sophisticated. This is illustrated in this report entitled the Global Threat Report. But more importantly, if you look, you'll see that spear phishing doesn't even make the list. It is not the prime cause of breaches anymore. It's actually coming in 5th place. You're seeing the exploitation of operating system vulnerabilities, the exploitation of applications, RDP open to the internet, and Allen hopping being the primary causes and vectors of most breaches that we see today. You're also seeing a shift in sophistication. You're seeing more cloud-based attacks. You're seeing process hollowing being used as a form of living off the land and lateral movement. You're seeing more attrition attacks or destructive attacks, and custom malware being purposed to actually infiltrate high-level government agencies, financial institutions, and tech firms. So how do we allow for us to spin the chessboard? How can we look at offense and offensive techniques and allow those to inform our defensive postures? How do we create a knight's fork on this virtual board? Essentially, how do we force the adversary to lose their queen? And the queen in cybersecurity today and in cyber attacks is literally that secondary C2 on a sleep cycle. Amongst that community of CIOs and CISOs who we interviewed, 33% of them are seeing hackers fighting back. They're seeing more and more counter-incident response where adversaries are doing everything from manipulation of timestamps to deleting logs, all the way through leveraging actual destructive attacks against the defender to punish the defender. Either it's ransomware being used, not Petya style, or the implicit use of wipers in systems. These hackers have truly transitioned the burglary to a home invasion. They are willing to burn down the house now. This is more challenging because not only are they willing to burn down the house, but they're willing to commandeer the house and attack your neighbors with it. They want to actually utilize your digital transformation efforts, commandeer them to attack your constituency, whether it be your board of directors, your customers, and or your partners. This happens in 3 ways. You've got network-based Allen hopping where they're using trusted subnets and VPN connections. You've got watering hole attacks that are not limited to just websites that are being polluted, but more importantly, mobile applications and applications that themselves have been corrupted through the APIs. And then you're seeing reverse business email compromise. This is an ongoing problem where they've commandeered your mail server and they selectively send out fileless malware against the board of your directors and the most significant customers that you may have. But even worse, they allow for neophytes and non-sophisticants to actually commandeer your environment as well. They are selling specific access to systems that they've commandeered. They are profiling systems now to say, this is Bank X. Who wants to buy a backdoor into Bank X? This is government agency Y. For $20,000 or more, you can have access to this agency and to this specific employee. There's 5 emerging cyber threats here in this world that we need to pay attention to, okay? Because the digital world and the cyber world have converged. Geopolitical tension will always manifest in cyberspace. And during periods of heightened geopolitical tension and even domestic tension, you'll see more and more destructive cyber attacks. Cloud jacking and subsequent Allen hopping will become much more commonplace, as evidenced by the recent indictments and investigations into large-scale campaigns to target managed service providers here in the US. APIs will become a very popular attack vector because of the implicit trust. Mobile rootkits are now beginning to flourish, and virtual home invasions that target political leaders and business leaders to commandeer their IoT environments to leverage extortion campaigns and or to stalk them and their families will become much more prevalent. So what do we do? Well, first we have to appreciate that there are 5 key challenges facing security operations teams. Perimeters are not effective in today's world due to telework, due to cloud computing, and due to the utility of applications. Malware is transitioning to fileless malware and is being custom developed to bypass traditional signature-based technologies. Frankly, we have too many security tools. We have too many silos between the IT departments and the security departments, and we don't have enough context. Like, threat intelligence is useful only if you understand how that threat would impact the entire stack, your entire IT stack. So what can we say here? Well, success in 2020 is truly about the delta on dwell time. Can you decrease dwell time between this incident and the last one? Can you suppress an adversary in real time to inhibit them from commandeering your environment and using it to island hop and target your constituencies. You know, oftentimes I say the problem with the cybersecurity standards as they exist, they're all about building fortifications, these impregnable structures that cannot be actually leveraged to bypass security controls. But that's not possible. You and I both know the type of adversary that we face today is determined, organized, sophisticated, and the more significant our brand or the personalities whom we protect with our infrastructure, the more likely we're going to deal with custom malware and intricate staged kill chains. So what do? Well, I think we need to invert the security paradigm. We need to protect ourselves from inside out. We need to create more of a prison-like environment, much like that of a supermax prison, to make it more difficult for the adversary once in to move laterally, force them to become resource constrained, and inhibit their capacity to communicate with the outside world. The fundamentals of intrinsic security are essential. Security must be operationalized through IT. All of your ideal camera angles already exist in your control points within IT, and they need to become sources of telemetry. We need to be able to empower our sysadmins to become watchers on the wall. And to do that, I recommend these 8 steps. We have to integrate our security controls. We need to audit current system state in real time. We need to obviously deploy next-gen AV and EDR, but in so much, we need to conduct regular threat hunting across our information supply chain. We need to micro-segment to inhibit lateral movement. We need to iron box applications so that those applications can't be misused and can suppress behavioral anomalies. We should apply just-in-time administration so the keys of the castles cannot be stolen. And most importantly, we need to evolve and deploy true workload security. You know, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled, my friends, was to convince the world he didn't exist. And that devil is somewhere within your information supply chain.
Coming up next.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chris Krebs, Director of the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency. First off, happy Cyber Week. I'm glad to be providing the closing keynote to the opening day of Cyber Week. And it's a pretty important one because at this point, by my count, we're 15 days out from the election. But the really interesting thing about all that is we're in the middle of the election right now. I'm coming to you from the past. And where I sit, at this point, over 5 or 6 million votes have already been cast in this election, whether it's from early voting in person or by returning mail-in or absentee ballots. So it's not really that it's election day anyway, or even election week. It's election month. We are in the middle of this thing. So that's what I'll talk to you a little bit about today is what we've been doing here at CISA in support of our state and local partners over the last 3.5 years to ensure that 2020 is the most secure election ever conducted. But you might be wondering, if you haven't seen me in a while, but yeah, I got a haircut yesterday, and that was a long time coming. And so I apologize to everyone that had to see my mullet previously, but that is gone now, and I'm trying to look a little bit more professional because we're going to be out there. We're going to be communicating with the American voter, the general public, about all those things that we've done so that you have the confidence in the election that you need. You need to get out there. If you haven't already voted and you have the opportunity to vote, get out there. What are you waiting for? All right. So before I get into that election conversation, I want to talk a little bit about CISA, who we are. I think by now, I hope most know who the cyber and infrastructure security, who we are and what we do. I've called us the nation's risk advisor before. And I think back to last year for Cyber Week when I walked out onto the stage. It seems like a decade ago, but we were right in the middle of that awesome Washington Nationals World Series run. And I came out on stage to Baby Shark as my walkout music. Now, the unfortunate thing about all that is that it's possible that the song Baby Shark itself opened some kind of rift in our reality that coronavirus entered. And thus, here we are. Unfortunately, we're not together. We're apart. But that's okay because we'll get through this in one piece. We've got election coming up. We'll get through COVID. And next year, hopefully, we can do this back in person here in D.C. All right, now into the elections. So what I'll start with talking to you about is the threat landscape and the activity we've been seeing across state and local networks. Then I'll talk about the work that we've been spearheading along with our federal agency partners and our state and local partners. And then close out about what you can do as an American voter. And to really round this all out, though, let me tell you, I have all the confidence in the world that your vote is secure. And let me tell you why. So over the last several years, we've been tracking a number of different threat actors. We've been working with our state and local partners to improve visibility over their systems. We've been working to improve the security of it, but also have a better understanding of what's going on those networks, as well as improve the reporting relationships. So from a visibility perspective of our election security infrastructure, we have the best overwatch of any other sector, at least from where we sit here at CISA. And so we're able to push out indicators. We're able to push out signatures to intrusion detection systems in all 50 states and in several states over every single county. Again, that gives us the ability to take information that we know, that some of the unique information we know here in the federal government that we glean from our intelligence community partners, our foreign partners, our private sector partners. We can load them up in those intrusion detection sensors and look for the bad guys. So to date, we have not actually seen anything along the lines of a coordinated campaign purposely targeting election systems like we saw in 2016. And that's important. We have better visibility now than we did then, and we have better reporting pipelines now than we did then. And we're just not seeing that level of activity. Now, that's not to say that state and local systems aren't getting hit every single day. Ransomware and other cyber criminal activity is definitely on the trend line upwards. And there's collateral damage that happens in some of these flatter, unsegmented networks. And so we do see some collateral damage or some spillover. But again, because of our detections, because of our reporting pipelines, we're able to get on those incidents early, mitigate quickly, and ensure that the vote can still go on. And then again, through our partnerships with the intelligence community who are out there looking every day, again, we're not seeing this coordinated campaign by the adversary that we saw in 2016. But like I said, we're 15 days out by the time you're watching this, so plausible deniability. I don't know what's going to happen, if anything, between today and then. It could happen. Bad things sometimes happen, whether it's a technical glitch in a system. We have seen some overload of system of voter registration and other services, voter services. Those things happen. So it's important that we keep our wits about us, that we quickly identify issues, and then we communicate with our partners and with the American public on what we're seeing. But this jump to cyber attack, we can't fall into that trap. We've got to get to the bottom of it. We've got to investigate, we've got to remediate, and we have to communicate. So moving on, in terms of the work we've been doing over the last 3.5 years, I've already talked a little bit about building partnerships, deploying mechanisms, but what really is behind that is building this vibrant election security community of practice. So it's not just CISA, it's not just the FBI and the IC and the Department of Defense, but we're really here as a supporting command or a supporting element to our 50 states, the territories in DC, the ones that are responsible under the Constitution for administering the United States elections. We are there to help them. We're there to provide information both on the risks they face, the threats we're seeing, and mitigations that they can use. It's about building that team because no individual organization, no individual county, no individual state could withstand the onslaught of a nation state capable adversary. So we've got to work together. We've got to build that team in the umbrella. And along those lines, like I mentioned with the intrusion detection sensors, we have those across all 50 states. To think 4 years ago that we would have that sort of coverage, when I talk to the team, it's unheard of. If you'd asked, if you could jump back in time in your DeLorean and go tell the team that that's the capabilities we'd have in place in 2020, I think they'd think you were crazy, a little Doc Brown crazy maybe. So we're there, we're in this position. We have the visibility, we have the relationships, we have an election infrastructure, ISAC, all 50 states, thousands of county level jurisdictions, again, able to share information on a regular basis. So if one county has an issue that they get on top of, they can then share the indicators of compromise across the nation. That really is, it makes this a team sport. those mechanisms were not in place. We didn't have that ability in 2016 when Illinois found out about their voter registration database. We weren't able to move as quickly, but we're there now. We also have within the normal critical infrastructure protection partnerships, and I'm going to use some government bureaucracy terms here. We have a sector coordinating council, and we have a government coordinating council. And all that means is that we have an established mechanism, an established process for the usual suspects in that vibrant community of practice to come together and talk about the things that they're worried about, develop risk management guidance, get information out there. We've been incredibly active, and I think probably some folks would say we've been too active. We flooded the zone with guidance on mail-in voting risk assessments, on public service announcements with the FBI, on threats and claims that the adversary may have. We've been pushing a lot of information out there because we believe that the more we can share with the American voter, that last line of defense, the better prepared we'll all be. Those coordinating councils are key, are pivotal to making sure that we have the appropriate representation from state level, county level, local jurisdictions, cities, the private sector, the vendors that make the machines, that provide the services, the news. AP is a part of our partnership. Everybody's part of this team, and everybody's working to defend democracy. And I got to say that of all the things that I've been involved with here in my role since I came in March 2017, this is really the best example of everybody pulling together in the same direction and seeking to achieve that outcome of in this case, the secure and defended 2020 election. The second piece of the efforts over the last 3.5 years, building on those relationships and those partnerships, we've worked to better defend and harden the systems out there that are helping conduct our elections. And we've seen an incredible progression, incredible improvements over the cybersecurity posture of state and locals. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that everything's locked down 100%. That's just not reality. We have the same sort of machines and equipment to healthcare facilities, there are vulnerabilities out there. We know that this has been a rough year for vulnerability disclosure with some pretty significant vulns that we're continuing to work through. But again, the behaviors across the board are improving. We're seeing improved patch rates and cutting down that time to patch. And that's a great thing. We're seeing better auditing and logging of systems, backups. And that's really, I think, the key takeaway here. Yes, the cybersecurity posture is better, but the resilience of the system has also improved. And one of my favorite statistics here is paper ballots and paper records associated with the vote. In 2016, 80% of votes cast had a paper record associated with it. 82% is pretty good. But for this election, we're looking at over 92% of votes cast will have a paper record associated with it. And if anybody's in IT, auditability is key. You have to be able to go back, check the math, and be able to count back to what you know is a trustworthy an accurate outcome. That's what paper ballots give us. It gives us the ability to conduct post-election audits. And again, we're over 92%. And in fact, the increase in absentee and the increase in mail-in ballots is going to get that number up higher and higher. New Jersey is a great example. New Jersey has those systems, the direct recording equipments where you touch the screen, cast your vote, and it goes to removable media. New Jersey is switching to a system that has absentee ballots. And again, from an auditability perspective, that's an improvement. We've also seen an improvement of voter registration database security practices. And this is something that we've really been keying on over the last 1.5 years. And I got to admit, when I go out there, prior to COVID, of course, and was traveling across the country, meeting with election officials, and we talk about the threats that we see from Russia, from China, from Iran, from North Korea, from criminal actors. It's hard to really resonate when they don't necessarily see Russian or Chinese actors pop up on their networks and wave their flags and say, hey, it's us, pay us, or we're going to burn your network down. That's just not how those nation state adversaries operate. But what I've noticed, I think everybody that's been paying attention has noticed over the last several years, is that criminal gangs, that ransomware gangs have, as I've already talked, are on the upswing. They're really kind of finding that groove. And we're seeing some really crazy ransom demands from some of the whales out there, the private sector organizations, over 10 million. I've heard of $30 million ransoms. We're seeing big ones. So what we've been worried about is how these criminals have been targeting, the cyber criminals have been targeting state and local systems. Again, they tend not to have the capital or the investment that private sector organizations do. And so in a couple cases, they're going to be easy pickings. And we really wanted to make sure that that intersection of ransomware in the 2020 election didn't manifest in a way that would disrupt the vote, that would disenfranchise you as the voter. Last summer, we announced our voter registration database initiative. In fact, I think I talked about it at CyberTalks last year. And the idea was, let's harden those systems that are just so critical to getting us through the process. They're centralized databases in every state. They're connected to the internet because you need to be able to register. You need to be able to look up. So they've got some characteristics and attributes that we were concerned about. And the Center for Election Innovation and Research issued their report about a month and a half ago that says, it's a biennial report, but they say that over the last 2 years, security of those systems, those voter registration databases have improved. The additional implementation of multi-factor logging, backups, incident response plans. Again, these are great things. The trend lines are there, but most importantly, resilience, resilience, resilience. So even if you have an issue, you're still able to carry out the process. And know for the reporters that have heard me tell the joke, I won't use the Mitch Hedberg joke again right now. I'll give you a break on that one. The last thing that I want to talk about is what you can do as a voter. Really, I've already said it, the last line of defense here in American elections, the last measure of resilience is you. It's the American voter. You're seeing a lot of stuff right now. You're seeing ads, you're seeing tweets, you're getting a lot thrown at you. So you have to be ready. You are the last line of defense. Ultimately, you're the ones that decide the outcome of this election. So have a plan, participate if you can, and be patient. What does that mean? So be prepared. Have a voting plan. Know exactly how you're going to cast your ballot. Do not wait until the last minute. Even if you're going to vote on November 3rd, make sure you double check where you're supposed to go. It may have changed, honestly, whether it was a fire department or a school, those options may not be available this time around. So make sure you're clear on when and where and how you're voting. Also participate. Due to COVID, a number of election workers aren't available. They're calling out either sick or they're scared that they may get infected. But let me tell you what, Dr. Fauci's talked about this. It is safe to vote in person. If you implement the appropriate safety mechanisms and procedures, whether you wear a mask, social distancing, sanitization, it's safe. It's also safe to be a poll worker. So contact your local election office, see what kind of help they need. They may be good, but they may also need some folks to come in either in advance of Election Day or on Election Day or after November 3rd. But again, let's help out, right? This is about defending democracy. And last, be patient. Due to COVID, again, a incredibly disruptive force, we're seeing a change in how voting happens. There are two ways to vote, either in person or through the mail. If you go, due to the expansion of absentee and mail-in ballots, there will be an increase in the processing requirements of those ballots. And some states dictate how and when you can start counting. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, they can't start counting until the morning of. Now, the legislatures can change that, so hopefully they'll make that change in advance of the election and give those election officials a little bit of breathing room on the front end so they can count earlier. But that capacity issue could mean that with all the absentee ballots, they may not be able to count them all through November 3rd. And so we may not know some pretty key pivotal states on the evening of November 3rd. But let me tell you what, November 3rd or whatever November day it was previously, those results have never been official results. The official process, it's dictated in state law. There are federal legislative requirements as well. The certification process takes weeks. The seating in the Electoral College is not until December 14th. That's how it's always been. Now, the media can make projections, but that's speculative. So let's not get caught up in the hysteria of election night or election week and just have a little bit of patience here. Let's let the officials count the ballots. Let's let the pros do their job. So remember, please prepare, participate, and have a little patience. But like I said at the top, I've got an incredible amount of confidence. That's why I'm here. I'm talking to you about the confidence that we have in the security of your vote. So whatever you do, get out there, go vote, wear a mask, be safe, have a great Cyber Week. Happy Cyber Month. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak to you today.
A giant thank you to all of our fabulous speakers. All of these sessions are now available on demand for your viewing pleasure. Tomorrow we have another incredible lineup for you, and we will be discussing exciting topics like how DOJ cybercrime fighters are trying to stop Chinese theft, looking past the pandemic, future-proofing against data risk, teleworking for the government, the language of equity in cybersecurity education, and cyber risk and resilience in a connected world. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors again for their support: Accenture, AWS, Cisco, Dell Technologies, Fortinet, Google Cloud, IBM, Intel, Leidos, Lumen Technologies, McAfee, Carahsoft, Microsoft, Okta, Raytheon Intelligence and Space, Veritas, VMware, and Carbon Black, and Yubico. See you tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern Time for day 3 of CyberTalks. Thank you.